Welcome, everyone. My name is Tola Martz. I'm Issaquah City Council President, and I'm going to call the April 1st regular City Council meeting to order. Mayor Polly is not here, at least for the moment. She is in Olympia looking out for us and may be back later in the evening. At this point, I would like to ask the council and I'd like to ask those of you to join the council and myself in the Pledge of Allegiance to please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first item on the agenda is an item of special business. It's ID 0434, Sexual Assault Awareness Month Proclamation. And at this point, I would like to invite King County Sexual Assault Resource Center board member and Issaquah resident Sandy Duplage to the lectern to receive the proclamation. Whereas Sexual Assault Awareness Month calls attention to the fact that sexual violence is widespread and impacts every person in this community, and whereas in Washington State, 45% of women and 22% of men report having experienced sexual violence in their lifetime, and whereas demand for services at the King County Sexual Assault Resource Center jumped 19% last year, reflecting the cultural shift that is taking place that has prompted many survivors who have remained silent to now speak up and seek the help they need to heal. And whereas nationally, 1 in 5 children under 18 are sexually abused, and in King County last year, of the 4,888 individuals served by King County Sexual Assault Resource Center, half were children. And whereas working together to educate our community about sexual violence, supporting survivors when they come forward, speaking out against harmful attitudes and actions, and engaging in best practice sexual violence prevention work helps end sexual violence. Now, therefore, the City of Issaquah does hereby proclaim August 2019 to be Sexual Assault Awareness Month in the City of Issaquah, and we encourage all citizens to join in this special observance and join advocates and communities across King County in taking action to prevent sexual violence. In witness whereof, Mayor Polly has hereunto set her hand and seal of the City of Issaquah this first day of April 2019. Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Do you want to take a moment?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Polly, even though you're not here, and council members and residents. My name is Sandy Duplage, and I have been a board member with King County Sexual Assault Resource Center for over 5 years now, and I've supported the organization for probably close to 15. I think, the statistics that you cited, thank you very much, they're staggering. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys before the age of 18 will suffer some form of sexual assault in their lifetime. And it's shocking to me as a mother of 3 that we even have to deal with this in our communities. So, if you think about, there are over 60% of all sexual assault cases go unreported. Of the ones that are reported, only 1% actually are prosecuted. Clearly, more needs to be done about this issue, and more awareness needs to be made. The way that we can help, the way that you can make a difference is to support King County Sexual Assault Resource Center in all of their endeavors. They provide legal advocacy, they provide counseling services not only for victims but also for their families. They provide prevention and training in our schools. They can come out to any of our schools in this area to provide prevention offerings. So it's really important that we as a community embrace this organization and thank them for all of the great work that they do. So thank you again. We appreciate the recognition, and I will take this back to my board on Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandy. We really appreciate you being here this evening. The next item on our agenda is ID 0438, Puget Sound Regional Council Vision 2050. Tonight, Council will be receiving an informational presentation on Vision 2050 from the PSRC. Vision 2050 will be the long-range growth management, environmental, economic, and transportation strategy for the Central Puget Sound region. This is the first of 3 Council touch points on the draft Vision 2050. I'd like to invite Economic and Development Services Director Keith Niven to the lectern.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Martz. Good evening, City Council. I am going to simply introduce Ms. Erica Harris from Puget Sound Regional Council, and alumna of Liberty High School. And Erica is going to lead you guys through a presentation of the draft SEIS and the 3 preferred alternatives that are being considered at this point. And I'll come back.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here. And very importantly, I've been in many Issaquah Salmon Days parades. So let me make sure I know how to move this. Okay, I think you probably know a bit about Vision 2040 already. I worked with Trish to make sure that your regional growth center was designated a couple of years ago, and I appreciated all of your work in getting that plan together. The Central Issaquah plan was really impressive. And so after going through that process, you probably know that Vision 2040 is our integrated regional plan for sustainability. Some of the goals are to protect our environment, including our farms and forests, to focus growth in our urban area, and more specifically, our centers and regional growth centers. Vision 2040 has multi-county planning policies and a regional growth strategy, and that strategy is a framework. It's not where we set targets. It's a more general framework to provide some guidance on for the countywide groups to actually set those growth targets. That's something that's sometimes helpful to get more specific about. But now we need to plan for 2050. So we know from some of the forecasting work that we've done, we're going to expect another 1.8 million more people in the region by 2050. And 1.2 million more jobs. So we have quite a bit of work ahead of us. We also know that the region will become older, more diverse, and live in smaller households. So that also has planning implications. A bit about the process. I'm actually going to talk to you more today about the alternatives that are in the supplemental environmental impact statement, the draft. And in this process, we actually, our Growth Management Policy Board selected alternatives to go into the draft so that we could gather the environmental information and make a good, solid recommendation for a preferred alternative that will go into the draft vision plan. And we expect that to come out this summer. So that will have a preferred alternative and the multi-county planning policies. And those multi-county planning policies in part provide mitigation for growth. So they have environmental policies and housing policies. So as we see what the impacts of growth are, we can develop new policies that might go into the document. So right now we're at the draft phase of the SEIS. We're gathering comments, and I'll get a little bit more into that, but we'll select a preferred, or our board will select a preferred alternative in the next couple of months, and then we'll have a draft plan out throughout the summer, and we would like to get comments from folks at that point. And then by next spring is when we're planning to adopt Vision 2050. So we did have a scoping process last year, and we heard quite a few things. One of the top concerns was affordable housing. We heard that we wanted the regional growth strategy to be achievable, but also still have the same goals with protecting our open space and farms and forest lands and focusing growth. So the urban unincorporated areas are problematic for some areas, so they wanted to make sure that we have some focus on that, as well as some more policies on implementation. So the alternatives, the Growth Management Policy Board selected 3 alternatives last fall. The first one, or I'm sorry, I'll just go generally over the regional growth strategy. So it's kind of some of the same things as the General Vision 2050 plan, and it's really trying to support our regional growth centers, moving towards a jobs housing balance, protect some of those lands that are important to us, like farms and forests, and make sure that we connect our cities with good transit. So these are the 3 alternatives. The first one is stay the course, and this is our no action alternative. It's required by SEPA, and it does have a compact growth focus mostly in core and metropolitan cities. Issaquah in Vision 2040 was a larger city, but because you now have a growth center, you'll be a core city. And it also puts a lot of growth in, the metropolitan cities, Seattle, Bellevue, Everett, Bremerton, and Tacoma. And then transit-focused growth is the second alternative. That explicitly puts 75% of jobs and housing growth in high-capacity transit station areas. So those are light rail, commuter rail, ferries, and bus rapid transit. So there'll be less, this has the least amount of growth in the rural and unincorporated areas and areas without high-capacity transit. And it, as far as environmental impacts, which I know you received some information on that, you can look at that later, but it does perform best on most land use, transportation, and environmental measures. The third is sort of the other bookend, with stay the course being more in the middle, transit focused on is one on. Reset urban growth is kind of on the other end. It does have some focused growth in metropolitan and core cities, but it does disperse more population employment growth within the urban growth area, so it's a more dispersed alternative. And it does perform less well on those environmental and transportation measures. However, it does have less displacement risk. It puts less growth in areas of high displacement risk. That was one area that we heard was important to look at. So displacement risk is something we should consider for all of the alternatives, but that one, this one does a little bit better with that. So how to comment. We'd love to get comments from anyone. If you want to provide comments as a city, I think that's what you're looking at now. So we especially would appreciate any comments how you feel about the alternatives, and specifically reasons why, because we might consider a hybrid alternative, so putting elements of the 3 alternatives together. So getting to know that why is important. The comment period is open through April 29th, and there's more information on that website there, and I think you got pretty much all of the executive summaries, so that'll be really helpful to look at. So again, we are at this draft DIS process, and the actual Vision 2050 draft plan will come out in probably July with the multi-county planning policies at that point. And that's a point where it's best to comment on those formally. That's what I have for you for the alternatives.
Are there any questions for Erica before? And I am going to have Keith come back up and talk a little bit about our process beyond today, but questions for Erica? Councilmember Winterstein.
Thank you, Tola, and thank you, Erica, for being here. Erica, there's the important concept of the high transit communities that is part of alternative number 2. I think it's very important in how it's different than focusing growth just in the regional centers per the current vision, also known as no action alternative in the EIS. Could you just describe for everybody, what is those transit communities and how they're different, especially where they're placed, maybe relative to growth centers today? They're more dispersed, and they don't have to be within an urban center. It's really focusing. The idea is any transit hub that's wherever that may be, regardless of its proximity to a regional growth center. Could you speak to that?
That's right. And one reason there was interested in this is because we know that Link Light Rail is going up to Everett, and there were some transit station areas within unincorporated Snohomish County, and a lot of people thought that that would be a lost opportunity if they didn't plan in a robust way around those transit station areas. So it is a half a mile, a transit station area is considered a half a mile within a light rail station, a Sounder commuter rail station, a ferry terminal, that's the urban ferry terminals, and then half a mile around bus rapid transit stations. So it is, there are more of those, there are quite a few, than regional growth centers, but it does include that transit-focused growth alternative also does put a lot of growth into the regional growth centers as well. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Hunt?
So I had two questions. One is, how were these the alternatives that were decided on of all the possible alternatives?
We actually started out with a lot of ideas, and as our board discussed these various ideas, we kind of came down to some of these organizing concepts, and even the regional geographies changed a little bit. We don't even have, we're not looking at larger cities anymore, we're looking at high capacity transit communities. So it was a conversation with our growth board as far as trying to get down to these three alternatives. The stay the course is required by SEPA, but we really wanted to have bookends, so one that was more focused and one that was a little bit less focused, so that we could understand what the impacts were to transportation or the environment when you focus more or less. So I would say we did have some interest on both sides, but I think it'll be more telling when we get the comment letters back with who is interested in one or who is more interested in the other.
Okay. And then how does monitoring or tracking of how individual jurisdictions actually carry out these plans, how does that process work?
Probably on several levels. We do have a data group that kind of monitors growth and transportation measures, but we also have our comprehensive plans that we review. So we look at, we actually have a very thorough review of comprehensive plans, and that's also required by the Growth Management Act that we do that, and we certify them so that there's eligibility for transportation funds. But we look at consistency with our multi-county planning policies, with the regional growth strategy and transportation, or our regional transportation plan, and then GMA requirements. So once we have our framework, then the countywide group will actually select targets for each city, and then at that point the city needs to make sure that they have the land for the growth target. And so we actually look at that when we certify comprehensive plans, is to make sure that there's enough growth for that growth target. So that's another way to make sure things are consistent, and that we're a transportation planning organization, so it makes sense that we want to provide transportation for the planned growth.
Council Deputy President Batiste.
Thank you for your presentation this evening. I'm wondering, you mentioned that when you're getting feedback from the cities that there might even be hybrid alternatives. Has there already been some discussion around hybrids, and was it just between these three options?
There's only been very general discussions. I think we're also just gathering more information on capacity and making sure that 75% for the transit-focused growth actually makes sense, that it can be accomplished. So things like that, we're getting additional data, but we haven't heard specifics yet from the board on what else they would like to see different.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Erica? Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
So, Director Niven, if you could just give us a brief, where does this fit into the overall conversation around the city's response on the SEIS? Or SDIS, or however it is.
Okay, so what we've kind of put together is kind of 3 touch points for the council here in April. Tonight was really just kind of a presentation to get you guys starting to think about these 3 alternatives, whatever discussion happens tonight. And then on April 8th, at your work session, there will be an agenda item which will invite public comment. So if the public, and we've been kind of reaching out to our commissions and letting them know that this opportunity is coming on the 8th, so hopefully there'll be some folks that might want to give you some comments on the alternatives on the 8th. And then we're going to come back together on the 15th, where we'll talk about the 3 alternatives a little bit more in detail, and hopefully arrive at a preferred alternative or combination of the 2, if that's the way that works out. And then the other conversation point on the 15th will be to kind of test the council's appetite for whether you want to talk about some of the draft policies that are coming with the updated plan. Those are going through GMPB right now, and as Erica mentioned, those would be probably daylighted sometime this summer, but as GMPB is working through them, there are draft edited policies and action items that are kind of surfacing at this time, and whether the council would want to have a bigger conversation about those in May, June, we would want to maybe get some direction on that so we would know how much work to put into this in May and June. So that's what we've kind of set out so far.
Any questions for Director Niven? Councilmember Hunt.
In our documentation that was provided, there was a number of changes that would affect tailored towards our city, but how it would affect cities based on the different alternatives. And one change that I noticed was that there was increased impacts of the transit-focused growth option on risk of displacement. And so I wondered if you could talk about that one. It seems that that was one of the few where there was an arrow in the wrong direction for that option for our city.
Sure, and I'm going to give you my take, and Erica can let me know if I guessed wrong. So, part of the transit-focused alternative has an expectation that you're going to increase densities around transit hubs. And most cities, those locations are currently occupied by something. They might be occupied by older, less dense housing that would probably be removed and replaced with something that would be potentially at a higher density. And that housing would probably come at a higher cost than what's there now. And so those folks that may live, and this is actually not what we have here because of where our transit facilities are located. But in other cities, I'm assuming that's what their analysis showed, is that you'd basically take out, for example, maybe a 2-story apartment building that might be within walking distance of a transit hub because the plan calls for increased density in that location. You'd replace it by maybe an 8-story or 10-story apartment building, but what happens is those people living there are displaced, and then that housing that comes back in, unless it's somehow subsidized by the local government, it will probably be at a higher price than what was there previously because it's older and lower density. So that displacement piece happens through basically redevelopment opportunities around the transit centers.
Any other questions for Director Niven? Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
City Administrator, would you have anything to add to this right now? Nope. Okay. We are moving on to audience comments.
I'm sorry. Erica brought some literature, which I will hand to the city clerk for distribution.
Thank you so much. We're moving to audience comments. Audience members may address the council at this time. The guideline for public participation are displayed on the screen. And please limit comments to 5 minutes. Those who are signed up will be called forward first. If you did not sign up, I will ask for other speakers before closing this portion of the meeting, so don't panic if you're not signed in. If you are here as part of a group, please feel free to identify a spokesperson for your group. And we generally ask that if you want to show support for a given speaker to raise your hand so we know who in the audience is particularly resonating on that issue. So, has anyone signed up to speak this evening?
Yes, John Falstrom.
Good evening. My name is John Falstrom. My wife and Carrie and I live at 885 7th Avenue Northwest and have lived in the city for over 50 years. In that time, we've seen Issaquah transition from a quiet rural town to a city filling with high-rise apartment buildings and traffic congestion rivaling that of major metropolitan cities. I'm here tonight to discuss a traffic situation occurring on my street, 7th Avenue Northwest, between Juniper and Holly Streets. 7th Avenue has become a shortcut for vehicles seeking to circumvent the backups at Juniper and Newport Way. Often it seems vehicles try to see how fast they can go and treat our street as a personal drag strip as they race down the street. Over the past couple of years, my neighbors and I have noticed a significant increase in the number of vehicles and the often excessive speed of those vehicles as they pass our residences. This has become a safety concern as well as a quality of life impact on our neighborhood. 7th Avenue Northwest is a narrow, 30 feet edge-to-edge street with parking on both sides, with 15 driveways that back out onto 7th Avenue. It is also within 2 blocks of Issaquah Valley Elementary School. We and our neighbors have experienced many near misses and often must wait for short-cutting vehicles to speed past before we can safely back out of our driveways. I've attempted to work with the city staff to determine steps that could be taken to mitigate our concerns. I was told that the traffic calming program was a possible option. The staff did a traffic study last month in March and forwarded me the results. I was told that our residential street does not meet the criteria for traffic calming and that I needed to take this issue up with you, the council, for possible changes to the policy. In the 8-day traffic count, there were 6,680 vehicle trips on this 2-block section of 7th Avenue, and of those, 46% were exceeding the speed limit. The fastest vehicle recorded was traveling at over 70 miles an hour. Many of the speeding vehicles were recorded during school hours when the speed limit is 20 miles per hour in the school zone. I'd like to point out a couple of sections from the city's documents that were given to me. One is the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program. In the executive summary section, 3.1 Transportation Vision, it stated the program is designed to retain the positive attributes and quality of life associated with livable neighborhoods. In this section, the city acknowledges that with increased development and traffic congestion, there is an increased tendency for traffic to cut through residential neighborhood areas, causing a decrease in the positive attributes and quality of life. Also, quoted in that section, in addition, this cut-through traffic typically travels at higher speeds than is accessible or is acceptable within residential neighborhoods. In section 5.1 of the city's comprehensive plan, there are some definitions of collector streets and local access streets. Both of those subsections talk about creating little through traffic and just to provide movement within the neighborhoods, directing traffic to the arterials. In section 14 of the comp plan, identifies one of the goals of the transportation element to facilitate safe and efficient access and mobility of traffic and people. Section T1, land use, establishes a policy T-1.1, residential character, preserve the character of residential neighborhoods by establishing maximum allowable traffic volumes on residential streets that are substantially lower than traditional engineering methods would indicate in order to provide safe local access. In policy CF 1.6, talks about prioritizing capital improvements to maximize public safety. In the traffic calming program objectives, it talks about one of the objectives is to slow traffic speeds for motor vehicles to create safer streets and to reduce the need for police enforcement, along with several other sections in that. We and our neighbors are concerned that both the numbers of vehicles along with their speeds are a recipe for disaster. We would like to see the installation of speed bumps to reduce the speeds, as well as permanent reduction of the speed limit to 20 miles per hour and posted as local access only, as deterrents to both reduce speeds and encourage the traffic to utilize arterial streets, designed to facilitate that traffic flow. Growth is inevitable, but significant consideration must be given to life safety and the quality of life for those of us that call Issaquah our home. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is anyone else signed up?
Yes, David Kapler.
Good evening, David Kapler, 255 Southeast Andrews Street. I came to just talk about one item, but now it's three, but I'll be quick. Adjacent, what does adjacent mean? The discussion at the committee of the council about adjacent to future cell phone tower or cell phone antenna situation on an existing pole kind of talked about nearby, and adjacent meant nearby, and it would include people. But if you talk to more people and ask what does adjacent mean, they mean right next to it, and that could be very limiting as to who is exactly next to a certain pole. So please consider something that it clarifies what adjacent means in this case, or use 100 feet. Displacement risk was a new term, and I can imagine, I mean, we're seeing we don't need a whole transit center, just be close to a 554 stop, and we're going to see the housing upgrade, rents go up, and that's America. But how we deal with that is going to be interesting. I was thinking of, what about Beacon Hill? I've been under it many times where the housing has changed, but I've never actually seen above ground Beacon Hill where that is changing. I'm sure that those little Beacon Hill houses have become, if they're just stayed as houses, have become much more expensive, or they are coming down and bigger buildings are being built right there at the top of Beacon Hill because it's right there above the train. Traffic calming is pretty cheap if we do it. If you spend a lot of staff time doing the studies and all that we did for my neighborhood, it starts running the bills up. If we're talking about some of those speed humps and some signage, it doesn't cost a lot and could be a good solution to other neighborhoods beyond mine, which it's been very successful. I'm really amazed at how positive people are about it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else signed up?
Yes, Chris Petzold.
Hi, my name is Chris Petzold, and I live at 1934 Northeast Kenyon Court in Issaquah. I'm a homeowner there for over 10 years, and I'm here to speak in support of the resolution tonight condemning racism, discrimination, and related acts of violence. As we've seen white nationalism on the rise in our area, across the country and around the world, it's truly our responsibility to fight against it in whatever capacity we have. On the Friday after the terrorist attack in New Zealand a couple of weeks ago, I stood in front of the mosque in Sammamish as people were arriving for Friday prayers. I held this sign out there, and it says, "Love wins," and it must, and it does. We must do whatever we can in this case as a city to say that love wins. Love will always win over hate, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said in his sermon in the 50s and later in his book, Strength to Love. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. And hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Please support this resolution tonight, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Do you have anyone else signed up?
Yes. Aisha Shafiq.
Hi, my name is Aisha Shafiq. I live at 2019 216th Avenue, Southeast Sammamish. For 2017 and 2018, I was a part of the board of directors for the Sammamish Mosque, which serves the Muslim community in Sammamish and Issaquah. And I'm currently helping to administrate the Sunday school program over there. So I'm here in support of the resolution you're considering on non-discrimination. I'd like to thank the Issaquah City Council for considering this non-discrimination resolution. Since the 2016 elections, friends and members of our community have all been aware of a greater number of hate crimes and hate speech. People are aware of the statistics, but I'd like to talk about a personal incident with my sister when she was a victim to one of these hate crimes. In December 2016, while she was working the closing shift at Subway Klahani, when most of the surrounding stores had already closed for the night, she had a sole customer who began to make steadily increasing misogynistic comments while placing his food order. When he was paying his bill, he couldn't get his card reader to read his card, so she reached over to try to help him push it in, and he swatted her hand angrily and started to spew curses and xenophobic comments at her, which scared her greatly. He kept going until, even after she was ringing him up, until she left. She was shaken and called the owner, who came over. She went home, and it wasn't until morning that I found out what happened. In the morning, I got the non-emergency number from the police, and we called to report the incident. But this is probably the incorrect word, but the dispatcher who was on the phone told us there was nothing she could do, and she didn't take a report. She said, sure, the guy was rude, but it's not a crime. I had thought any physical act accompanied by intent of harm was assault, but the dispatcher dismissed it. She also stated that for the police to be responsive, my sister would have had to call 911 while the guy was on the premises, because they were private premises, and keep them there until the police arrived. She also suggested that my sister had no excuse for not having called 911 immediately, since she was old enough and spoke English well. My sister was quietly crying, listening to the call. After I hung up, she told me she had considered calling the police on the way home the previous night, but then she remembered the aloof attitude of the officers who had come to Subway before, and she was reluctant and scared to face that in her current state. And truly, the dispatcher's response had done nothing to allay the fear of how the authorities would respond to discrimination. As it happens, later that week, in one of those quirks of fate, Chief Michelle Bennett was coming to Sammamish Mosque as a speaker, Chief of Police Michelle Bennett. I told her about my sister's experience and asked her what the rules around relaying a hate crime or hate speech were. She told me quite unequivocally that the guy swatting her hand did constitute assault, and was surprised at the report about the dispatcher's response, Just that much validation lifted a burden from my heart. Furthermore, after the event, Chief Bennett made a point of calling me over to give me her sergeant's phone number to report the incident. I cannot express how that moment reasserted my faith in the system, how much it made me feel that I want to give back to the community that was serving to protect us, how much I want my children to volunteer for the city and community that, represented by Chief Bennett, was taking special interest to ensure that a wrong was made right. Sergeant Francis made sure she reached me too after I left her voicemail, and took down the details of her failed call to report the incident. They were able to obtain the recording of the 911, the non-emergency call, and I was told that the call had not been handled appropriately, and something about a training issue. She proceeded to give us an appointment to come make the report again. This time, as we talked to an officer face-to-face, the experience was very different. He was professional, to the point, but his demeanor was respectful. He told my sister after taking her statement that I'm sorry you had to experience that. I could see from her expression what a difference that simple statement made, regardless of what happened next. It's a big thing having faith that the community that is your home is represented by authorities that will support you. I believe the police managed to locate the guy and issue him a warning, but I know that just the act of having the police take her concerns seriously had a profound effect on my sister. She had experience now to show that the authorities would stand against such discriminatory acts and hate speech. This is the country of her birth, her college years, and now the country where she will raise her family. It is empowering to know that you belong and that your community will look out after you. We are fortunate to live in a multi-tier democracy with many checks and balances. Even when the messaging from one tier of government indicates greater tolerance for prejudice, other branches and tiers of government can counterbalance by reasserting the norms that make this country so great. And truly, the laws and norms espoused by the government have a real effect on the attitudes of the institutions and citizens it represents. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. And some hands up, going up for that. Is there anyone else signed up this evening?
Yes, Gregory Bush.
Good evening. My name is Gregory Bush. I'm with Wireless Policy Group, and I'm here tonight on behalf of AT&T. Our offices are in Issaquah. And I'm here to speak to item 7F on the agenda, amending IMC section 18.22. So I'll briefly outline the issues AT&T sees in the draft code as described in our comment letter submitted earlier today. So in brief, the FCC order issued last year regarding small cells requires all authorizations to build and construct wireless facilities, small wireless facilities, to be issued within the 60 to 90-day shot clock as applicable. So that's the local jurisdiction may approve or deny within those 60 to 90 days. And any failure to issue such authorizations creates a presumptive unlawful prohibition of wireless services. So the way we see it is if the authorizations are in the hand of the provider, then that's how the FCC intended its order. As it's written, the code is inconsistent with the FCC order. The code stipulates a 14-day period where if an appeal is filed, the provider has to stop work on any pending applications while the appeal takes place. And we see that as inconsistent with the FCC order that all authorizations have to be out of the jurisdiction's hands within the 60 to 90-day period. So our recommendation, AT&T's recommendation, is that either adopt the code with our suggested changes, which would make these permits non-appealable, or alternatively, the city could allow construction to continue and have a carrier sign a waiver saying that construction would be at risk for the carrier. So construction could continue, but depending on the outcome of the administrative appeal, the carrier may have to go down and take that facility down. And I'm here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is anyone else signed up?
Yes, Devendra Maharaj.
Good evening. My name is Devendra Maharaj with Verizon Wireless. My office is located in Bellevue, Washington. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I will be brief today. Verizon is in support of the comments made today by Mr. Greg Bush. On behalf of AT&T, we support the language addition. Verizon would also like to thank the city and the city staff for the huge effort they've put towards this code update. It doesn't go unnoticed, and we just want to say we very much appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any other signed up?
Beth Gerens.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Martz, council members, city staff, members of the audience. My name is Beth Javins. I am a resident of 1036 7th Avenue Northwest, and I have been retained by the Board of Directors for Visit Issaquah. We are the new destination marketing organization, also referred to as the DMO, for our fine city. And I want to say thank you, first of all, for supporting this effort. I am thrilled to be here. I have been accused of bringing the snow with me. I've also brought some sunshine as well. I have a former resident of Florida. Again, like I said, I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm looking forward to collaborating with many community leaders and our stakeholders and partners and promoting our community, our partners in lodging and hospitality, our restaurants, our event venues, and highlighting our natural surroundings and other amenities that support visitor travel and visitor engagement. It's often said that tourism is economic development's first date. It's rare that somebody would move and relocate a business without visiting a community. It's also rare that we would want a situation where we would want people just passing through. We obviously would like for them to stop and spend time and become advocates and stewards of our community as well when they're staying here. As a new resident, I've spent the past few weeks immersing myself in all things Issaquah, so I myself have become a visitor and a tourist in a way. And I routinely walk all the trails in downtown. I've met many groups of hikers and cyclists throughout the area. I've enjoyed a wine and art walk, restaurants in multiple neighborhoods throughout the city, mountain biking, hiking, a performance at our acclaimed theater, and there was one coyote sighting for which I did not have my cell phone that I could not verify publicly. But in the coming months, our board is going to be working towards a strategic plan, and we're going to be going through a visioning process and also creating goals and a supporting framework for our organization. And we look forward to working with you and updating you on that progress. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else signed up?
No one further has signed up to speak.
So, would anyone else like the? I'm sorry. I'm getting. No. You're a half step ahead of me. Would anyone else like the opportunity to speak who has not signed up this evening? Please.
Yeah, hello, my name is Jim Edwards, and I've been a homeowner at 240 Southwest Francis Lane since 1989, so 30 years. Several comments I want to make. One, if we can't love our neighbors, we need to at least respect them. So I don't know much about what's up for vote there, but sounds good to me. The other one that surprised me was everybody talking on their cell phones doing 70 miles an hour down the street that should probably use some speed humps. So I would say I would also like to speak in favor of that. The main reason I'm here is to talk about I'm concerned over some of the proposed zoning changes coming up and how they would affect Mine Hill Road, which is just over here. Which I'm not in favor of. I did see two of my neighbors speaking in favor of that, and that was a month ago when I was out of town. And I did write a couple letters into the city council and an email or two, and is that a good way to communicate my thoughts with everybody? Good, because I'd like to give you another letter on my way out. The main concern I have is when it comes to changing the zoning areas, I understand this proposed change because of lack of sewers in Sycamore, for example, area. But my area of Mine Hill has sewers, has everything there. And the other thing was to preserve the flavor of the neighborhood. Well, my particular area of Mine Hill, it may be zoned RS 9600 on my side of the road, but right across the street is higher density, and just to the north 3 lots is basically apartments. And I kind of view the changes to the proposed changes to the zoning being much like putting a speed hump on your way out of town as opposed to in town on the narrow roads where we need it. It just doesn't fit the circumstances for where we're at. And I'm just asking the city council to take that into consideration, where something might work in the Sycamore area, for example, but it certainly doesn't work next to the fish hatchery where I live. Has anybody got any questions or anything for me or anything I can do here as somebody who likes this town?
We just take comment.
You just take comments. Okay, well.
But if you mentioned you had a letter, if you wanted to share.
Yeah, should I just hand it off to the clerk here? Okay, that would be great. Is that the proper term for you? That's okay.
She's actually city administrator, but I understand your point.
Okay, definitely appreciate that. Okay. You will, okay, I'll follow through with that. Thank you very much, appreciate it. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else wishing to speak this evening? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. Just a quick comment. My name is Irma Hena, and then I am an American Muslim, and I'm here with my kids today to, on behalf of Muslim Association of Puget Sound, MAPS, the largest Muslim organization in the United States. I am currently in the leadership of MAPS, and then I am former MAPS board member serving as a woman secretary for 8 years. So this evening, I'd like to express my appreciation to the City Council, to consider, and that I strongly encourage the elected official to pass the anti-hate and anti-racism resolution, as it is more important now than ever, given the increased fear and anxiety in communities, including Muslim community, especially after the New Zealand. The resolution, though it may seem small, but it has a huge impact in letting the wider community know the city values are. We Muslim Americans with the community has been part of the city growth, and it is very impactful for us and our children and all of us, and give us the confidence to see that our elected officials are care and want to create welcoming environment where hate and violence are not acceptable. I think I'm missing something. I live in Sahali, Samamis since 2006. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments, and saw some hands up. Is there anyone else wishing to speak this evening? I get asked 3 times. Second time, is there anyone else wishing to speak this evening? Finally, third and final call, anyone else wishing to speak this evening? Hearing none, public comment is closed, and we will move on to committee and regional reports. So we will start with Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Martz. I have no report at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you, Council President Martz. I attended the King Conservation District Advisory Committee meeting on March 20th, and we continue to discuss the proposed rate increase per parcel, which is the funding mechanism that the King Conservation District uses to fund their conservation work. We talked about the importance of the work and the messaging around the need for getting the word out about this organization, and they are interested if we would be interested in having a representative come and speak to us as well as speak to other jurisdictions, and they are looking to build support for this rate increase so they can continue programs such as the fire prevention program that Issaquah participates in. I attended the WIRA 8 Water Resource Inventory Area 8 Salmon Recovery Council meeting on March 21st, and we discussed a number of issues, including 2 items that are currently being discussed at the state level in their budget. One of them is the Riverbend Floodplain Restoration Project on the Cedar River in the Puget Sound Acquisition and Restoration PSAR program. And then the other project is the Cedar River Royal Arch Floodplain Reconnection Project in the Floodplains by Design program. These are both very important Cedar River habitat restoration projects that are critical for salmon recovery, and so we discussed about the importance of having these items in the final budget, and that budget is being discussed currently at the state level. And then we also saw 2 presentations. One was from the Southern Resident Orca Task Force, and the other was a success story about Jack Hughes Creek fish passages and stream restoration, and this is in the city of Sammamish. I attended the Cascade Water Alliance board meeting on March 27th, as did Mayor Pauley, and this was a very brief meeting. It was consent items only. And then I had previously mentioned that there is a consideration that the board will be considering a option for reducing or removing the RCFC Regional Capital Facilities Charge for homeless shelters. And so this is a item that will be discussed at the next meeting, and that will be in April. The next meeting of the Cascade Water Alliance Board will be April 24th at the Cascade Water Alliance office in Bellevue, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Ray.
Thank you, President Martz. The Services and Safety Committee met on March 12th. There were 2 items of business in that meeting that are on today's agenda. Agenda Bill 7721, the 2019 Arch Work Program and Budget. The committee recommended to approve this agenda bill. This item is currently on the consent agenda, though I am planning to ask that it be moved to regular business, so it will provide an opportunity to review the Arch Work Plan in light of recent media coverage. Also, we heard Agenda Bill 7723, the cemetery fee increase. This agenda bill is also on consent this evening. The committee recommended that this bill be postponed indefinitely. The committee evaluated the proposed fee increase while considering the longer-term funding strategy that is being developed by the city. It was decided that the best course of action is to postpone any change in cemetery fees until the work on the long-term funding model is completed later this year. The next meeting of the Services and Safety Committee will be April 9th at 6:30 here in council chambers, and the agenda has not yet been set. And that concludes my report this evening.
Thank you. Councilmember Winterstein.
Thank you. Thank you. 2 reports tonight. The first is on the Growth Management Policy Board. Our next meeting is this Thursday, April 4th at 10 a.m. at PSRC headquarters in Seattle. We will have a discussion, but there will be no action taken on the Vision 2050 growth strategy alternatives, which we heard about tonight, that was presented to us earlier tonight. That discussion will continue in May, and selection of the preferred alternative is expected in June. We'll also have our first opportunity to discuss proposed additions and changes to the policies within the development patterns, transportation, economy, and public services chapters of Vision. These discussions will also continue through June. And as we heard tonight, in July, it's expected the first draft version of Vision 2050 will be published in July. It will have identified the preferred growth alternative and policy updates. The review, debate, and updates to the draft will continue into next year. The expected finalization of Vision 2050 is in the spring of 2020. And then regarding the Council Infrastructure Committee, we met on March 21st here in council chambers. There were 2 items on the agenda plus our regular monthly project status update. The first item was Agenda Bill 7714, amending IMC 1822, wireless communication facilities and related fees. This was the 3rd time for this bill to be discussed in committee, and during this meeting, we focused our attention on the public notification requirements for Level 1 and Level 2 reviews. This bill is on tonight's consent agenda for approval, but in light of the multiple additional comments that we heard this evening, I think it's the benefit for the public and for my colleagues on the council that we bring I'm going to request to bring that item down to regular business and give an opportunity for some comment and discussion and response to the comments that we heard this evening. And then the second item on that agenda for the 21st was a conversation with Parks Director Keith Watling and other city consultants around the city facilities and the plan going forward for addressing the facility space study that was done. And we provided, the committee members provided comments and questions to Jeff, which he is going to be carrying forward, I think, in developing a more detailed work plan for how the council will be addressing the space study over the next year. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman.
Oh, no report.
Council Deputy President Batiste.
Thank you, Council President Martz. Just a couple quick scheduling items. The Eastside Human Services Forum's next meeting will be April 18th. The agenda is still TBD, but I wanted to point out, I had talked a few months back as we had gone through a whole large event with community members across the east side on the opiate and heroin crisis, and it was called Next Steps to Make a Difference. And all of the information from that meeting is now on the website, including the overview of the task force recommendations and an overview of all the east side cities and what they're doing in each area. It's a large body of information. It's really important. So I just wanted to point out that that is there, and that's eastsideforum.org, and also the Eastside Human Services Forum event presentation from that day, and then the King County Opiate Crisis event presentation as well. So a ton of work on there, and it's all up on the website. So I just wanted to remind everyone about that, so if they want to take a look. And then the next Economic Development District Board meeting is not until May 1st. So that's TBD. Thanks.
Thank you. So Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee is going to be meeting on Wednesday, April 10th. The pre-pick meeting is Metro's Innovative Mobility Program. Metro's Innovative Mobility Program is leveraging emerging mobility services and new technologies to give people more ways to get around King County. Join us to discuss the importance of integrated mobility, the policy considerations and adjustments that could enable the region to realize more benefits from public transportation, and the complications of demand versus resources, including capacity and funding, and the importance of partnerships. Then in the main PIC meeting, a couple of things. We are going to have the Affordable Housing Committee appointment. There are, I believe, 4 Sound Cities Association appointees. They're going to be on the new GMPC Affordable Housing Committee. I believe you should have all seen the email from Deanna that the appointment process closes on Thursday. It is open to any SCA member city elected official. It's not just GMPC. And I am actually working on a different housing issue, so I'm not going to be applying for that. So if anybody is interested, we probably only want to send one application as a city, but please let the mayor or myself know if you're interested. Challenge Seattle Middle Income Housing Initiative, that is actually a meeting that is AKA former Governor Gregoire's effort, and Mayor Polly and I are going to that tomorrow morning in Seattle. I want to mention also a discussion on Initiative 976, and that is, I talked about it a little bit in For Good of the Order 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to ask you all again about it tonight. And so then I'll mention GMPC. What to say about GMPC? The easy part was we approved the Affordable Housing Committee charter. The uneasy part is if you've ever wondered how important it is for a city to come to some sense of a body before we talk regionally, the county was looking to send a letter on Vision 2050, and SCA is not taking an opinion, and none of the member cities that were at the meeting, typically if SCA doesn't take an opinion, you're free to represent your city. None of us who are cities that were in attendance felt comfortable giving an opinion on that letter because we haven't, as a body, developed any thoughts on it. And so you have not lived until you have said no to Executive Constantine. So that was very exciting, and just showing the importance of us reaching consensus so that each of us can speak intelligently on our regional boards and commissions. With that, I will move on to the mayor's report, which I have changed all the pronouns for, hopefully, and if I haven't, I apologize in advance. The fault is mine. There will be no executive session this evening. If you haven't seen the news item on our website, City Administrator Emily Moon will be pursuing a long-term dream of traveling the world with her family. She will be leaving her employment with our city in August. If you'd like more information, visit the homepage of our website and look for the link under Community News. We're both excited for her future adventure and thankful for all she's done for our community since coming to the city of Issaquah in 2014. Mayor Polly will be leading the charge to find her replacement and has already begun the process. We expect to select a national recruiter later this week to assist us. Be rest assured, prior to hiring, council members, community members, and staff will all be involved in the lengthy process both firsthand and with regular updates along the way. Our goal is to have someone in place by August. The Urban Village Development Commission is retiring. This past Tuesday, March 26th, the Urban Village Development Commission held their final meeting. The board began in 1996, and since then, 49 community members have volunteered their time to review and recommend new development agreements, as well as land use permits in the Highlands and Tallis urban villages through these last 23 years. Both development agreements we terminated in 2018, and now the Development Commission will take over decision-making on project planning for Highlands and Tallis, as they do for the rest of the city. We want to publicly thank all the UVDC commissioners and also staff liaisons, Keith Niven and Lucy Sloman, for their work and commitment to excellence over the years. City website redesign. To serve our customers more effectively, efficiently, and conveniently, the city has just launched the website redesign project. Please provide your input on how we can make it better for you by participating in our online survey. You can find a link to the survey in the community news section on the homepage of our website at issaquah.gov. Southeast 42nd Street art installed. Last week, new artwork was installed along Southeast 62nd Street. Artisan Susan Zacola was inspired by the surrounding landscape and circulatory systems of paths and roadways at the city's largest capital project in its history. The visual references Susan used in designing the artwork include moving wheels and the flowing water of rivers. The new installations are located on both sides of the new bridge along Southeast 62nd Street. In addition to the very talented artist, we would like to thank the Arts Commission and Amy Dukes, our arts coordinator, for their work and commitment to see this project through. 2019 Hall of Fame Awards seeking nominations. This week we are opening up nominations for the 2019 Hall of Fame Award, a top honor for making a lasting contribution to our community. The award will be presented to the recipient on May 30th at the 40th Annual Issaquah Community Awards, sponsored by the Greater Issaquah Chamber of Commerce. We will hold our own celebration and induct the recipient into our Hall of Fame at the June 3rd regular council meeting. Nominations close on May 1st, and the nomination form can be found on our website. Cultural events at Lake Sammamish State Park. Last week, the mayor, along with 1,500 others, attended the successful Holly event, the Festival of Colors celebrating the beginning of spring at Lake Sammamish State Park. There are several other cultural events happening this summer at Lake Sammamish State Park, including on July 7th, a new festival to celebrate African American soul and gospel music. On August 10th, a Cambodian cultural festival, including Cambodian music, dance, and traditional dress. And on August 17th, Indian Independence Day celebration, including an Indian dance drama in full costume, food trucks, and more. Stay tuned for more information on these great events. And then Coffee with the Mayor. There will be another Coffee with the Mayor event on Wednesday from 1 to 3:30 p.m. April 1st. April 1st? I think that's a typo. I think it would be April 3rd. The Pickering Room at City Hall Northwest. Mayor Polly looks forward to engaging with the community members for open dialogue. We're going to proceed on to the consent calendar. The consent calendar was distributed to council in advance. If authorized, the items on the consent calendar will be considered together and approved by one motion. First of all, have the payables and payroll been reviewed?
Yes.
Does any council member desire to remove any item or items from the consent calendar and consider it under regular business? Councilmember Ray.
Yeah, I would like to move Agenda Bill 7721, the 2019 Artwork Program and Budget, to regular business.
It will be so moved. We'll move it to the end of regular business. Councilmember Winterstein.
Yes, I'd like to move Agenda Bill 7714 to regular business.
That will be moved now to the last item on the regular business agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar as amended? Council Deputy President Batiste.
I would like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar as amended.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is regular business Agenda Bill 7766, Statement Condemning Racism and Discrimination. Would any of the council members who requested this item like to make comments? We'll start there. Or we can then go to, would someone like to make a motion? Council Deputy President Batiste.
Yes, I would like to move to approve resolution number
2019-3
in condemnation of racism, discrimination, and related acts of violence.
Second.
Moved by Batiste, seconded by Walsh. Is there any council discussion? Councilmember Goodman.
I'm happy to give the bill proponents opportunity to talk first.
Okay.
Nobody's talking, so I didn't.
Council Deputy President Batiste, do you want to take her up on that offer?
Sure. First of all, I just wanted to thank the members of the audience for their thoughtful comments this evening. The resolution that we have in front of us addresses recent events, both in our world and right in our backyard. And I think that it's really important to be able to, at these points in time, there are many different points in time that we could, unfortunately talk about this, but as these things come up, I think that it's important for us to speak to it. And I think that what was striking to me in the resolution were the last two whereases, so I'm going to read them. Whereas our remarkable diversity in Issaquah makes for a vibrant, innovative, and better place, and whereas the unity and strength and success of our communities nationally and here on the east side depends on ensuring that all of our residents are safe, welcome, and supported. And I wanted to point that out because that's really, for me, the crux of this, is that we want to make sure that we in Issaquah that we really have a safe and welcoming community. And when things are happening within the world and some things that recently happened in our own backyard, that we're speaking to that. So I'm in support of this resolution for this evening. Thank you.
And I will also take Councilmember Goodman up. It's weird both chairing this and being a council member. So I'm going to also quote the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was quoted earlier tonight, but my quote that has always provided me sustenance over the years was, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. That means different things to me now than it did 5 or 10 years ago. 5 or 10 years ago, as a student of history, I felt it was a sign that if you looked long enough that history bends in the right direction. But nowadays, I feel like what's important in that statement is that it doesn't say irresistibly bends and it doesn't say inevitably bends. I believe it bends towards justice through hard work and through actions both large and small, nationally and locally. I believe we've seen long before even the current leaders who are in office, in high office and low office, as the ongoing rise of internet culture and anonymity, singling out of people based on their skin color, their faith, where they come from, has just gotten worse and worse. And this, the move to bring this resolution forward really came about because a few of us were at City Hall the day of the horrible New Zealand attacks. And, I just have to say attacks on places of worship are they're just about as bad as you can get. The only way to attack people harder is to attack their immediate family. Places of worship are where people go for love and family and community and even identity. And it's the idea that people can be attacked and divided and cast, attempts made to cast people out through their communities of faith are just particularly horrifying. So why this resolution right now? I believe that the way that you defeat hate and the way that you defeat terror is you make it not work. You make it so that the next time somebody decides they want to do something horrible, whether it's a globally horrible or whether it's just being stupid and spray painting something on somebody's house, which is directly impacts the people close at hand, you have to make it not work. You have to make it so that the net effect is not more hate, but more love. When the vandalism happened at the Muslim Association in Puget Sound, I wound up going to a Muslim service for the first time in my life. I had never been to a Muslim service, but they had sort of an interfaith service, and they invited people who weren't Muslims to come in and see how it worked for them. And recently, I had the opportunity to go to the Sammamish Mosque, which I hadn't ever been to before, and met a number of wonderful people who appreciated their neighbors reaching out to them. So I believe in the end Dr. King was right. I think that with hard work, the moral universe does bend towards justice, but it's only because we keep at it. It's only because we work hard. Having said that, I look forward to more celebrations of love and community with my neighbors as we get past the current times where so many people seek to create division and mark members of our community as something other. And that's why I'll be supporting this tonight. So, other comments? Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you. So my comments will be a little bit different, only because I want to go down memory lane just a little bit. And I passed out to my fellow council members a couple of documents that I got off the city website, and I have a few extra copies up here if anybody cares to follow along. So I think it's important to note that the city and the council already twice, we've stated our opposition, strong opposition to racism, discrimination, hate crimes, related violent crime, and terrorism. A long time ago, on April 1st, 2002, about 17 years ago this very day, the council adopted a resolution in response to the reprisals in wake of the September 11th terrorist attacks. And the resolution stated the following. I know you all have it in front of you, but people watching do not. Whereas terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001 were so devastating that they have affected everyone in our nation, including citizens of Issaquah and Washington State. And whereas violent acts intended as reprisals have been committed against those who are perceived as potentially associated with terrorism and against their businesses, their places of worship, and their families, including over 25 documented cases in Seattle and over 50 documented cases in Washington State. And whereas it is especially critical at this time for all Americans to come together to stand up against intolerance of another's ethnicity, lifestyle, race, culture, nationality, or religious beliefs, as these are the very attitudes that breed terrorism. And whereas the city of Issaquah wants to uphold its responsibility to work to prevent these kinds of discrimination and prides itself in doing its best to treat all individuals with dignity and respect. And whereas the mayor and city council of Issaquah recognize there is still much to be done to teach tolerance and cultural sensitivity among civil servants and citizenry, and to create safer communities throughout our city and our state. And so in that resolution, the council adopted very specific resolutions, meaning things that we were going to do. Now, therefore, be it resolved, 17 years ago tonight, that the Issaquah City Council and Mayor urge all departments and the Issaquah School District to direct appropriate attention and support and resources to supporting local and state efforts to, number one, reduce tolerance and hate crimes towards those of different backgrounds or beliefs. Two, provide support to those in communities targeted by such crimes. Three, work with young people, community groups, and local organizations to assure procedures for reporting such crimes are in place and understood. 4, clarify and reinforce procedures to respond to discrimination and harassment in the workplace. And 5, welcome and foster positive interactions among all peoples and all cultures in support of a world that works for everyone. That resolution also proclaimed Issaquah a hate-free zone, and it recognized Human Rights Day and urged everyone to exercise intolerance. In December 2016, the mayor and council referenced that April 2002 resolution when proclaiming December 5th, 2016 to be Tolerance Awareness Day, and that proclamation condemned all discrimination and racism. And so tonight we have a proposed resolution in condemnation of racism, discrimination, and related acts of violence. Neither the prior resolution and the proclamation are not referenced in tonight's resolution, but two specific acts are referenced: the recent abhorrent murders in New Zealand and the racist graffiti in Klahani. The resolution on tonight's agenda proposes two resolutions. First, that the council and mayor pledge to fight against all racism and discrimination wherever it may occur. And second, that we unequivocally condemn hate, violence, and terror, and instead embrace compassion, religious freedom, and peace. As to the first, to pledge to fight against racism and discrimination wherever it may occur, I'm not sure how we do that. This isn't intended to be negative. It's just my concern about that statement is that we can't do that. We simply cannot fight against all racism and discrimination around the world or even around the state or even across King County. Do I wish we could? Of course I wish we could. So in light of what I think is problematic language that we resolve to do something that we actually can't do, I will be proposing language to revise that first resolution. As to the second resolution, we have already condemned hate, violence, and terror twice. So I would like to make sure tonight that we have an impact beyond this third statement of condemnation. I really want us to have more than just 3 pieces of paper that say we're going to do something and that we condemn discrimination, hate, violence, and related bad stuff. As I mentioned 17 years ago today, we made 5 very specific resolutions, which I read already. So what I want to know is how are we doing with those? What kind of progress have we made on those resolutions that we made 17 years ago today? One of the concerns I have about the resolution tonight is that it suggests that maybe we haven't made any progress. In fact, we've heard comments stating that it's getting worse and worse, it's more important than ever, anxiety and fear, and why now? Because how do we defeat these issues? We have to figure out ways to make it not work. So I'm hopeful that we've made progress, but the fact is that we don't have any analysis or evaluation on whether we've made any progress. I think we have, but I don't know. And there isn't anything in the resolution tonight that addresses what our localistic statistics are or what we've done to make progress on the 2002 resolution. So I would tonight like to propose that we take action tonight that resolves to analyze our city's progress toward progress regarding the 5 specific resolutions that we made 17 years ago. And then after we analyze that progress, then we will know what steps we actually need to take in order to make sure that we get progress on what most, if not all of us, believe is an ongoing and troubling problem regarding hate, discrimination, and repeated violence. So what I would like to do is on page 2, section 1, I would like to, is it a motion? Motion to revise or
an amendment?
An amendment. To replace that language with following language. That the City Council and the Mayor hereby renew and restate the resolutions in Resolution 2002-9. That's a motion.
Discussion? Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you. I am in support of the amendment. In the same speech in which the Prime Minister of New Zealand said, "They are us," of the victims of the terrorist attack in Christchurch, the Prime Minister of New Zealand also issued a call to action. She said, "We each hold the power in our words and in our actions, in our daily acts of kindness. Let that be the legacy of the 15th of March, to be the nation we believe ourselves to be." And she was speaking about New Zealand, but in the spirit of "they are us," I think that this is a call to action for all of us. So reflecting on this statement, I believe there's power in words and a power in actions and a power in the daily acts of kindness. In this resolution, we are using words, and to realize the vision of a peaceful and welcoming place, we will also need to take actions. We will need to turn our thoughts and words into actions. And Because of that, I am very much in support of this amendment, which I think clarifies the directions and next steps. I am in support of the resolution, and I think this makes the resolution that much stronger. It adds the power of action. And I'm sure there's a lot in terms of what I can learn from the community as to what actions we can take. So I want to also commit to doing the work of serving this community better by understanding the needs of all community members, getting to know my neighbors, and taking steps towards being an active and engaged participant and making us the welcoming and supportive community that I believe we are. So for this amendment, thanks.
So, Member Goodman, can you restate the amendment?
Sure. The amendment would replace the first resolution on page 2, and it would say, "The City Council and the Mayor hereby renew and restate the resolutions in Resolution 2002-9.
Okay. I have a question for the city administrator, which on resolutions, this is restating. Actually, I'm sorry, maybe I'll come back to Stacey on it. Do you see this as being something that would have an administrative work package associated with it?
Oh, I thank you for asking. I forgot to say, and I was going to say after Councilmember Hunt spoke, is that whether or not this passes, the amendment and the resolutions that's before us, I would like to make a motion to direct the administration to come back to the council in maybe 4 months and present information to the council about how we could analyze and evaluate how we might analyze and evaluate our progress toward the resolutions from 2002, so that the council and administration can figure out a way to do that analysis, so then we can, if necessary, take additional steps to make progress toward those resolutions.
Okay, so on that, is that a request separate from the amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, then, yes, then you've addressed my question with it.
Okay.
Comments, thoughts? Councilmember Winterstein.
Is there an intention to offer a second amendment? The main motion?
Second amendment?
Yes.
No.
I thought there was something you said earlier that made me think that this was just going to be the first of 2 potential amendments.
It wouldn't be amendment. I was going to make a separate motion after we're done with the resolution.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Hunt, did you have further?
That's it.
So, anyone else? I don't want to speak twice before.
To clarify, since this is one of the first times I've come across this, at this point, we are discussing the amendment, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
We are. So I appreciate the amendment, and I like it, and I support it. I think it adds some teeth to the process, so I'll be supporting it as well. Council Deputy President Batiste.
I will be supporting the amendment as well. I think it makes it the resolution stronger, and so I would be in support of that. And thank you for pointing out what we've talked about in the past and how we can follow up on that work, in addition to what you're asking the administration to look at, because I think we always need to be able to gauge those sorts of things, and sometimes we don't always have that historical perspective, and that's really, really important. So I appreciate the amendment. Thank you.
Other comment? No? All right, let me go back to my script. If there is no further discussion, all those in favor of approving... I'm sorry. Of course. First, we need to vote on the amendment. My apologies. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, all in favor of the substitute amendment language as proposed by Councilmember Goodman, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The amendment carries unanimously. We're back to the main resolution in front of us. Further discussion on the main resolution. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. I would again like to very much appreciate the community members who have come forward to discuss this. Being one of the original ones that supported this, it really was quite a touching moment when we were in City Hall, the same day as the terrorist attack in New Zealand, but then also bringing it back to our own community and looking at what had happened in Klahani. Today, certainly, we saw some of that with the Issaquah High School and even seeing that in social media. I would like to point out that in the resolution, we do also recognize that this is very, very important for our community. It states, whereas 1 in 5 community members in Issaquah are foreign-born, and our diversity in all ways continues to grow and enrich our lives. I think that's very important, and yet, it states, whereas hate crimes in Washington state have increased by 32% in 2017, nearly double the rate experienced nationally. This really goes to why this is important as a timely factor for us and for our community, and that's why I support it. Thank you.
Other comments? Councilmember Winterstein?
No, thank you. I don't have any prepared comments, but what I do know about myself and other human beings, when there is threat, when there is danger, we do look around and try to ask ourselves, who are our friends? Am I safe? Is my family safe? And what somebody said 17 years ago or 2 years ago may not provide any consolation. It's what those around you and your community members and your family and the leadership around you, what do they say and how do they react at that moment to help provide assurance that you here now and in the future, feel that you are welcome and that this is a safe place for you to be and for you to raise your family. And I view this resolution as originally proposed to be just that, is to speak to the moment and touch people at a time when there is uncertainty. Yes, there are many times when that happens, and most of these factors are far beyond our control. There's really little that the city can do what happens in New Zealand, for example. And I'm pretty sure that's not the intent, but I came to this thinking that I know that there are members of this community, both here in Issaquah and nearby, who were ready to receive some words of thoughtfulness and kindness and acknowledgement of their fear, and that for us to be able to say that they were welcome to be here, we count them as our brothers and sisters and members of the community. That's important. Sometimes it's just to take a moment and say that. And that's what we were doing this evening, and it's well worth our time, even if we do this every year going forward, or in response to any event that happens, for us to take the time and acknowledge those fears that people have and to address them as a community. It will always be worth our time.
Thank you. Councilmember Ray.
So it is when something shocking happens, such as September 11th, 2001, and the retaliation that precipitated the resolution in 2002. And it is the acts of terrorism in New Zealand that have precipitated us reaffirming our views on inclusion and renouncing hate. And what I think is really important is, well, two things. One is that we do that, and we periodically come back and reaffirm our stance. But it's also probably more important that every day, regardless of whether there's a shocking, outrageous act of hate, that every day we live our lives and we live the way we interact with our neighbors in a spirit of inclusion and of love and of community. And that's what makes for great communities. So, super supportive of this resolution, but even more supportive of the ongoing values that we need to espouse in this community of inclusion and community.
Any other comments? Council Deputy President Batiste.
I just wanted to say one other quick item that it was, as we talk about progress that we're making and where we're at and what we need to do and how we can measure what we're doing. It was great to see in the mayor's report tonight about the cultural events that are going to be coming up at Lake Sammamish State Park. And I just had an opportunity to go to Cultural Conversations in Bellevue just last week, and it was really amazing and eye-opening, and something that, you know, across our communities can be so meaningful in terms of being welcoming and opening and just learning from all of our neighbors and the residents here. So looking forward to looking at that sort of broader picture of all of the work that has been done, what work needs to still be done in light of where we were at with our last resolution.
Any final comments? So if there's no further discussion, all those in favor of approving amended resolution number 2019-3 in condemnation of racism, discrimination, and related acts of violence signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
And then,
Councilmember Goodman?
and as I mentioned earlier, I would want to make a related motion. I would move to direct the administration, and I've got a copy to you now. Move to direct the administration to report back to the council in about 4 months with a proposal for how to analyze and evaluate the progress made toward Resolution 2002-9, so the council and city may determine what, if any, actions are needed in order to satisfy the promises made in that resolution.
Second?
Motion has been seconded. Discussion? Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. Looking at the original resolution in 2002, as much as it does have specifics on directing the school district and city departments to do certain activities, I don't feel like it was really set up in a way that created specific actions that can be measured and monitored. So as much as I love me some really good data that I can look at and see progress on things, I'm not sure this was set up in that way. So I would be a little bit concerned in directing the city staff to take time necessarily away from any other projects that they're working on toward creating a framework around these specific actions and measurements. So I appreciate the idea of being able to measure our actions toward reductions in intolerance and things like that. I question whether this is the right framework for that and whether we should have another discussion about that.
Clarify.
Councilmember Goodman.
I want to clarify, the motion doesn't direct the administration to create to come up with any statistics, or all it would do is direct the administration to come back and propose to the council how we might go about analyzing and evaluating. And then it would be up to the council to figure out what, if any, other actions we might take, which could involve nothing, which might involve further direction. There's a whole host of things. I think the point really here for me was, as I'm looking at this over the last several days, this is the third strong statement, and I think there was even a welcoming one within the past year. So that could be 4. I didn't pull that one off the website. That could be 4. And at what point do we look at the difference that we're making? And I heard the audience comment tonight about what a difference it made when the police reinforced with action. And so I think it would be important for us to figure out if we're making progress, what kind of additional differences we might need to make. So again, it doesn't, beyond coming up with some dialogue back to the council about where we might go from here and how to evaluate and analyze, it doesn't direct the administration to do any more than that.
Councilmember Hunt.
I am in support of this motion, and I To Councilmember Walsh's concerns, I think a lot of the issues that we address on council are things like affordability, or the one that comes to mind is conservation, clean air, clean water. There are value statements that are hard to quantify. Nonetheless, I think it is very important for us to try to find ways of making sure that we are addressing these issues. And so I think that we can and should find metrics to assess if we are, for example, directing appropriate attention and resources to supporting these efforts. I think that something like resource allocation, we could look into that. So I think there are ways that we can assess our progress, and I think that in the process of doing that, we'll also be able to see what we're doing, what we're potentially could be doing in the future, and where to go from here. So I am not concerned that these are not specifically quantified within the resolution, because I think that the intent is really to assess our trajectory towards meeting this goal, and to do that in a thoughtful way, and then to see where we can go from here. So I am completely in support.
Councilmember Ray.
So when I look at the now therefores, and we talk about what we are resolved to do, if we are resolved to do something, we should be able to come back and say, what have we done with that resolve? Otherwise, this is really just an exercise in kind of stating our values and point of view. But I think by resolving, I think we can go further. I think that we can take some affirmative action in these areas, and to do that, I think it's important that we have a way to understand where and how we can measure our progress on that.
Other Councilmember Winterstein.
Yep, this is a comment about kind of procedure only. It's not really about the substance of the issue. It would be my preference that there would be some, before a resolution was considered like this, that there would be, I knew that there was some type of dialogue that happened between the administration and the council, at least council leadership or a sponsor. So I think that would inform both parties, and we could have the actual action that is being requested, I think would be better understood. And so I think procedurally, I would have liked to have seen a request like this kind of handled kind of at a leadership level on those Wednesday morning leadership meetings to discuss that before it came forward like this. It's just a procedural question. That's just, that would have been my preference.
Before I go to Councilmember Goodman, I want to ask City Administrator Moon, if council moves forward to vote in the affirmation on this, are you comfortable that you understand what's being asked of the administration, and that it would be something that the administration could process?
I understand the ask. I think there's always opportunities, and Councilmember Goodman has provided that in her timeline, proposed timeline, to enter into a discussion and kind of clarify what that output would look like, so that we meet at least her expectations as the sponsor of this motion. So I do understand what's being asked for, at least at this point in time.
Okay. Councilmember Goodman.
To Councilmember Winterstein's procedural question and working through leadership, this is a little difficult because there are 3 sponsors of the bill. I cannot come into leadership and talk with another 2 sponsors of the bill. An OPMA violation could occur. So that made it a little bit difficult. I did touch base briefly with one person in the administration, we kind of had the same issue with the resolution. It was kind of a one-touch resolution too. So I just wanted you to know that it wasn't an attempt to duck procedure or be a surprise, but that was a concern.
All right, thank you. want to say more?
There is no bill, so I'm not sure what OPMA problem there would be. So the problem, so.
It is, it's a resolution. It was on the agenda. It's council business.
I'm sorry, referring to the new motion.
Got it. Okay, so I think that I will be supporting this this evening. I don't think we're making a specific commitment to any particular course of action. This would come back, I would expect this would come back as some sort of agenda bill for staff effort towards this subject, possibly involve ID memo, likely. Okay. One thing that, and I'm not going to add it to the motion, but I wonder if the Human Services Commission could be involved in this conversation, if it fits within their charter. Seems like it might, and that they could be part of the conversation. So with that, do we have the language of the resolution? Isha, do you want to get back?
Sure. The motion is to move to direct the administration to report back to the council within the next 4 months with a proposal for how to analyze and evaluate the progress made toward resolution number 2002-09 so the council and city may determine what, if any, action or actions are needed in order to satisfy the promises made in that resolution.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Walsh.
This coming up at this point, I had a question about what that was measuring. I very much appreciate both of your responses to let me know. That helps clarify for me. I hope this comes with something that we really can take action on. I think that would be a win for the city, so thank you.
No further comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
The motion passes 6-1 with Councilmember Winterstein in the negative.
I believe 5-1.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I not? Was there an abstention?
Oh, 6. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
My apologies.
6-1. All right. Thank you all for this very productive conversation. We're going to move on to Agenda Bill 7770, Finance Consultant Services. I'd like to ask City Administrator Moon to make some introductory comments on this item.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I want to introduce this item by saying that improvements to our financial system policies and procedures are the city administration's #1 priority. In fact, this was among the first things that I spoke to newly elected Mayor Polly about as she took office, and I know that she also shares my commitment. It's a topic for which I also gained a deeper understanding of its urgency and criticality as 2018 unfolded and the Finance Department began reporting to me. The scope of the work that we will describe tonight is the product of several months of examination, during which we tried to get a clear picture of the long-standing issues that have kept us from operating as effectively and efficiently as we need to. I want to express my appreciation to Beth and to our finance team, who've had the courage to ask for an infusion of assistance and have remained dedicated to the work that is ahead of us. As Beth will relay, this is only one of several bodies of work that we will need to undertake to put ourselves in a position poised for success. While it can be difficult to publicize our challenges, Beth and I know that the organization cannot continue to piecemeal this work while still attempting to get the day-to-day work done. We need some additional resources to take on comprehensive improvements. And that concludes my introductory comments, and happy to have Beth make the presentation tonight.
Finance Director Beth Goldberg.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I am here to present on Agenda Bill 7770, which would allow the city to engage in financial consulting services. Following on Administrator Moon's comments, I want to give a little bit of context and background about what we're asking from the council tonight. We are seeking, the administration is seeking council support in entering into a contract with the Government Finance Officers Association, more commonly known as GFOA. There's research and consulting center to help the finance department, the administration, and really the city as a whole start to look at how we are delivering our financial management operations. Yes, this is focused on the finance department, but it is affecting all parts of the organization, the administration, and I would even argue how the council does its business. So we see this as a very important work item. Before I go into the details, I do want to point out that the city's financial management policy does give the mayor the authority to enter into professional services agreements up to $300,000 in a dollar amount. This is below that, so from a strictly policy perspective, we are not necessarily required to bring this to all of you, but given the import of this issue to the functioning of the overall organization, we felt like it was important for you to be aware of this body of work. Also, want to, at this point, we feel like we could absorb the costs of this work within existing appropriations, but as the work unfolds, and there are some other elements that I will also speak to, there may be a need down the road to seek a budget amendment. So with that in mind, we also wanted the council to be aware of this. I also want to point out that there were some general discussions about this potential need during the 2019 adopted budget process, but we've now taken the time to flesh this out a little bit further, so we're in a position to provide you more details. So first I want to go into some background about why this work is needed and why this is so critical to not only the finance department but the overall organization. As you're all aware, the state auditor's office audits our books on an annual basis, and they recently completed the audit of the city's 2017 financial statements. This was the fourth consecutive year that the state auditor's office issued a finding against the city, and the finding was centered around what is known as our internal controls, our ability to produce accurate financial statements in compliance with state and federal laws. 4 consecutive years we've had this finding. I want to point out, while this finding is very serious and the administration takes this finding very serious, I want to also make it clear that there was no evidence of fraud and no loss of funds. However, weaknesses in internal controls does leave an organization vulnerable to such acts. So again, this is an important finding, but we have not suffered any fraud or loss of funds up to this point. In making this finding this year and as well in previous years, the state auditor's office points to turnover in staff in the finance department, as well as challenges associated with implementing our financial management system as underlying causes for these internal control challenges. These variables are important in our ability to produce accurate financial statements, but they're also the underpinnings of some other challenges that we're seeing in the finance department. And again, given the import of this, not only to the finance department, but to the overall functioning of the city, we feel that after 4 years of these findings, and frankly, several attempts to address these challenges with internal resources, we feel that we're at the point now where we can't address these challenges internally. We need expertise and assistance from outside entities to help us work through these challenges. I will say also, before I go into the specifics, that one of the challenges that we have is that with staff turnover, with a system that is not functioning effectively, our day-to-day tasks are taking longer than they might otherwise take. And so we've got to focus existing resources on keeping those day-to-day operations going, and in my my professional judgment, don't see us having the bandwidth to then do this forward-thinking work that is needed to get us on a better trajectory. So that is one of the reasons why we are proposing to engage these resources now. So in terms of the scope of work that is being contemplated, Government Finance Officers Association was on site interviewing city staff from throughout, both in the finance department and in other departments, for 8 days in March. And they identified through these interviews, through reviewing our documents and our systems, several major obstacles that are impeding the city's financial management operations. And these challenges and areas can be broken down into 5 major categories. The first of which is our financial policies. The city does have a set of financial management policies, but there aren't related procedures, and the policies that we do have are incomplete. And so this is creating challenges for staff both within finance and in the other departments in terms of understanding who's doing what, roles, responsibilities. So there's a lot of time spent on who's doing what, how are we doing things, rather than a clear path of what the expectations are. So it's making our work less efficient, less effective, and frankly less consistent. So one example that I will give you in this area is CIP projects. As you know, we have a number of CIP projects every year that we are completing. Some of them are small, some of them are larger. There are inconsistent practices among the departments and within finance about closing out those projects. Some departments are staying on top of them, closing out the projects. Some departments aren't doing as good of a job. And finance sometimes has the information to close out the projects, sometimes we don't. So what is happening is if a project isn't being closed out, we then aren't taking any funds that are left over and returning them back to their home-based fund. So it's creating some reconciliation challenges. So that's one example of where consistent policies, procedures around closing out CIP projects will help us better function as an organization. Another area that GFOA identified as an impediment to our work is the deployment of Munis. Munis is our financial management system. It was implemented in 2015, and the city, for a variety of reasons, did not fully complete that implementation. And when I say fully complete that implementation, we've got it, it's working. But for example, the city didn't engage in a robust training curriculum for users of the system. So users in the department don't necessarily know how to access the data in Munis. So it creates challenges for getting the data that people need to do their jobs. So this body of work with GFOA's assistance will be to look at how Munis was implemented and make recommendations of where we need to make changes and how it's being deployed, how it's being set up, and we'll also then look at a more robust training program for city staff. Another area that is creating challenges is our chart of accounts. This is the underlying structure upon which all of our finances are based. And when the city first implemented Munis, there was an update to the chart of accounts. The city found that chart of accounts to be cumbersome to use, so last year there was another attempt to recreate the chart of accounts. And this is a good example of where doing something in-house when staff is stretched thin has its challenges. A chart of accounts was created. There were some deadlines. There wasn't a strong enough effort to make sure that there was buy-in from all of the city departments and to make sure that the newly proposed structure was going to work for all parts of the organization. So we've had a number of challenges since then, and I will give you one example of where we have had challenges, and this is a question that I imagine I'll get from council at some point. The new chart of accounts changed the way lease and rental revenue was being categorized. So our Parks Department has a number of facilities that are available for rent and lease. Those revenue lines in the new chart of accounts is no longer reflected under the Parks Department budget. It's reflected in a category called miscellaneous, and it's lumped in with other rent and lease revenues. So it's very difficult to tease out how much revenue Parks is generating from our financial systems. At some point, one of you up there is going to say, so how much revenue is Parks bringing in? And it is going to be very difficult for me to answer the question. It's requiring Parks to maintain some side systems where they're categorizing this revenue, and it's going to be a lot of extra work to answer that question. Not the most efficient way to be doing this. So we need to look at our chart of accounts and engage city departments and make sure that the structure is going to work for all parties, and make sure that it is going to work on the back end reporting that is something we do to all of you, and then both in use, frankly, within the organization as well. Another area is organizational roles and structure. As we tackle the items above, we hope that our work is more streamlined and more efficient, and it may be that we can either better do our jobs with the existing resources, or maybe even redeploy some resources and beef up our capabilities in, for example, analytic areas that I would argue that the organization is currently weak on. And then they offered some observations on what is being called other contributing factors. Every good study has an other category, so this one has an other category. And one example that falls under this category is our ability to process payroll is very challenging. Part of it is made challenging by just the setup of Munis itself. But another complicating factor is that we have very complex pay and benefit structures that have, we have a lot of nuances in our pay and benefit structures. So it's not set up in a way that allows the system to automatically calculate things, so it is prone for challenges. So that is another area that, as we start to look at this body of work, that will be among the things that we are focusing on. So that is the general body of work that GFOA is proposing. We are still working with them on the full scope of the project, but the initial body of work that we're anticipating is going to be about $130,000. I want to then note that this is not, from my perspective, the only body of work that we need to tackle. So if we tackle all of these things here, that is going to put us on a better trajectory moving forward to manage our finances. What it doesn't do is then say, what do we have now? And because of our challenges, we have not done as thorough of a job reconciling our existing fund structure as I would have liked. Some of it is made more challenging by the fact that it is hard to get data out of our financial system. So if we're going to change our practices moving forward, we also need to make sure what we're sitting on is a clean, accurate set of books. So I am in the process of working on a request for proposal that would bring in additional accounting resources and help us do a historical look at our funds to make sure that once we have these systems in place, that we've got an accurate accounting of our funds, so that we basically were moving forward on a clean slate. So that is another body of work. It's separate from what we're contemplating with the GFOA. As that work unfolds, we will also be coming back to council and sharing that information with you. So The question is we're going through this work, and actually maybe before I do that, I will point out also that these challenges developed over time. They did not happen overnight. The fix is not going to happen overnight either. This is going to be very difficult, challenging work, and so I just need to put that caveat out there that this is not an overnight thing. This is a many-month, maybe year or two effort that we are undertaking now. So what does this work look like then on the back end? And why are we doing this? What does success look like? In doing this, the city's goal, the administration's goal, is to first put us on a path towards clean audit findings. We want to have improved financial reporting capabilities so that we can report not only internally to the organization how we're doing, but also to you, council members, and to our residents. So, for example, I know there is a desire for quarterly financial reports. I want to be able to produce quarterly financial reports. It is very difficult with our current system to be able to do that. So that is a goal. That is what success looks like on the back end when we can do more regular reporting to council. We also see improved efficiency and effectiveness of the operation is a desired outcome in improved employee morale. We have in the finance department a hardworking team, but it is a team that is stretched because we don't have the systems in place. So I would like to see us have stronger employee morale, feel like they've got the tools that they need to succeed. And then before I wrap up and take questions, I also want to point out in terms of the importance of this work is as the city is looking to take on more capital projects, potentially more debt, our ability to preserve our AAA bond rating, they look at our financial picture, and so these audit findings could be a challenge to our bond rating. It certainly, as I mentioned, could impact, or it does impact my ability to report out information to all of you. It's got some impacts potentially on our ability to secure grants. They are also looking at our financial picture. So this is really important to the whole organization. And with that, I will wrap up.
Thank you. Before we go to questions, I see that our mayor is back from jousting in Olympia, and I want to ask if, do you want to join us now, or do you want to wait till we can take a bio break after this item is over, and then maybe take 5 minutes and shuffle seats? Yes. Okay, that's what we'll do. Questions for Beth? Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you. I had one question, and that is, in the materials it said that the mayor had the authority to enter into these contracts. Can you or Administrator Moon review how that is? Because I think there are different types of contracts that the mayor can enter into in different amounts, and so I think it would just be good to briefly review that.
Yes, so per the financial management policy, the mayor can enter into a professional services agreement valued at up to $300,000.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ray.
Thank you for doing this. I think this is overdue. I think that not only does it address the issues that the state auditor has raised, that no organization, be it a not-for-profit or a city or Boeing, can operate effectively without knowing what your financial health is. And so I think there's no more important thing that we're doing right now administratively than getting our financial ducks in a row. So thank you for doing this. I think my biggest fear is that we're not going far enough. I think there's probably more work that needs to be done than what's been outlined here. As I was listening to you and we were talking about Munis, I was hearkening back to last year when we were talking about a new budgeting system that we were going to put in. And so I don't want us to overcommit and underdeliver. I want us to be able to tell us what it's going to take to fix this problem, and then let's go fix this problem, because from where I sit, it's one of the most significant administrative challenges that we have in the city right now. I guess there wasn't a question there, but thank you anyway for doing all this.
Other questions? No. So I have a question before we look to make a motion on this. So this doesn't have, so we said that it's basically, let me just reiterate, it's authorizing the mayor to use her financial discretion to enter this, as opposed to normally citing specific dollar value authorizations. Is that an accurate description?
Yes, it is. It is a statement of support for the mayor entering into this contract, and an acknowledgement that if at such time down the road that a budget amendment is needed to support this body of work, that the council would be willing to entertain that budget amendment. Entertain. Well, I mean, I can't commit you to a decision. That would probably be some scope creep. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Seeing no other questions, I would like to move to authorize the mayor to enter into and execute a contract with the Government Finance Officers Association to complete the scope of work outlined in Agenda Bill 7770, and to prepare a future budget amendment, if necessary, to cover the cost of this work.
Second.
Motion has been seconded. Any further discussion? Councilmember Winterstein.
All right. Thank you. And Beth, thank you for stepping up here tonight. And much of the story that you told is not a product of your own work. And I know that coming into this and discovering this and realizing these things needed to be done, that's quite a challenge you've undertaken. So I appreciate you stepping up to this. And I want to, I want you and the organization to be successful at this. I think in the last 3 or 4 years, we've updated our financial policies deeply twice. So to hear now that maybe it's not just the policies, but also how to implement, how to follow them that we're lacking, ouch. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine, because you stated that we do also have to update our policy. So I'm going to be keen to understand where these gaps might be, because it certainly seemed very credible and dramatic improvements when we did update those. So that'll be very keen to understand what we need to do there. Though I do appreciate your example of the closeout of the CIP projects. I totally get it. If you can't reconciliate all of the revenues and all the receipts that you may have received, or the expenditures, and that they're coded properly. I understand also what can happen after perhaps there being years of not properly reconciling all of your expenses, and you've got balances somewhere that you can't completely explain. So that would be good. Now, we did hire consultants to implement Munis. I'd be very interested, because I think you said this is not just about process, but this may lead to a kind of a re-implementation, a reconfiguration. You did admit that we have changed our chart of accounts at least twice. I knew there was once, maybe even twice now recently, and you gave a good example as well of how that parks lease and rental revenue gets swept into a miscellaneous, and it's hard to tease that out. But again, these were the hiring consultants to help us with Munis, redoing our charts of accounts. We've made many attempts at those recently, and so I just feel the call and the recognition, the very public recognition that we need to do it again, will demand, I think, a higher degree of scrutiny and transparency. And I think that's just incumbent with because of the recent history. And also, we have recently reorganized the finance organization as well. So some of it just is redoing some things that we've done recently. It is somewhat of a contradiction in my mind that we can maintain, that we have a AAA bond rating, and I know that financial policies and our completeness of those is one of those aspects. So it's a contradiction in my mind to hear that, man, we still need some work there, yet it's a factor within the ratings that we do have. So it looks like you want to say something about that. I'll give you that opportunity right now, and I have some closing comments to make.
Yeah, so our last bond rating was issued in 2014. We recently, with our recent financing, it was a bank loan, and so we didn't need to go out for a bond rating with that. And these state auditor findings have occurred since then. And so, among the variables they're looking at is our financial statements. And so, our fund balances remain very healthy. Our revenues are very healthy. We are conforming with our financial management policy in terms of those fund balance levels. So, there's not a concern from that perspective. And frankly, our financial health is making this, it's critical, but if our financial health were in less solid, these problems would be magnified even more. So I'm not here to say we would get a downgrade, but we run the risk of a downgrade if they're looking at these findings that have occurred since the last bond rating in 2014.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that additional information. I appreciate that very much. I've seen from the outside, not sitting in this council chair, many different projects where financial systems have been implemented, but also various ERP systems are implemented. The common attributes of any type of success stories, generally there is business process and cultural change that is identified and implemented as part of the system implementation, and that system is configured to implement those new changes. It also, and other common success attributes are very strong and visible sponsorship, executive sponsorship throughout the entire project, and that there truly is a team effort that goes cross-departmental. No one organization owns it. There's a leadership and there's sponsorship, and the workers are always part of what is done. And then finally, you bring in really good people who've been there, done that, have done it before, and you buy that expertise, and they help you identify what needs to be different, and they can help you implement that. Those are common attributes of successful projects. This is a project, I realize this is just leading into maybe a project like that, but others have done it. We can do it too. It takes things like that. Again, I thank you for stepping forward and making this, public, being the voice of what has to be done, even though much of it happened before you were here. But you have my confidence, and I'd like to see you and the organization succeed with this effort. So I'm going to support this resolution.
So can I maybe add a few other details that speak to your point? First of all, GFOA, when they were out on site, said that, we have significant challenges, but they're fixable. So that is something for all of us to keep in mind as we are going through this difficult work. These are fixable challenges. The main point of contact that we're using with GFOA, her name is Shirley Hughes, she's recently retired after spending 40 years in the public sector. She has successfully implemented Munis in 4 jurisdictions, and I did some reference checks on her before we engaged her work, and some of it was going into organizations that were struggling with Munis, and one of the references said, we hated Munis before she got here, and then, she made the changes, and we now love it. And a lot of it does speak with that process, aligning processes with the systems that you spoke about in your comments. So thank you for your support, and just wanted to give that additional context.
Other comments? I will just say thank you for this sort of very comprehensive discussion of where we're at this time. You have a big challenge, but you're hearing a lot of support from council. So thank you for putting this together, and thank you for the ongoing conversations that are sure to be lively and timely going forward. So, any further discussion? No? If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of authorizing the mayor to enter into and execute a contract with the Government Finance Officers Association to complete the scope of work outlined in Agenda Bill 7770 and to prepare a future budget amendment if necessary to cover the costs of this work, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And we have the two bills that we have pulled down off of consent and good of the order left, and we are going to take a 5-minute break to allow everybody to shuffle down a spot and our fearless leader to join us up on the dais, and we will return at 9:24. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so
Super. Thanks. Welcome back, and thank you, Council President Martz, for standing in while I was absent in Olympia. The next two items under regular business will be those that have been pulled down. AB 7721, which was on the consent calendar, is an agenda bill requesting council approval of the 2019 work program and budget for a regional coalition for housing. There is no staff presentation on this evening, or no new information being provided, but Councilmember Ray wished to bring it down to ask some questions on camera. I will hand it over to Councilmember Ray.
Thank you, Mayor Pauley. I think we can all agree that affordable housing is one of the most important challenges facing the city and our region. And Arch has served this community and other member cities for more than 2 decades. In that time, the need to provide affordable housing has increased dramatically, as has Arch's role in the region and the portfolio of properties. I asked to bring this agenda down to be heard in regular business tonight because I wanted to provide an opportunity to discuss the challenges that Arch faces, talk about the work that is being done to address those challenges, and understand how Issaquah and other member cities can support Arch in continuing to succeed in this important work that the organization does. So we heard this agenda bill in the Services and Safety Committee and had some good questions for Lindsay Walsh. No, Master. Yeah, Lindsay Walsh had some great questions for Lindsay Masters, who is the new executive director. And I have a few more questions to ask, and I know Administrator Moon has agreed to field these questions. But I also thought it would be an opportune time to see if there were any other council members that had questions relative to Arch, given some of the recent media related to the organization.
Great. Do you want to start the questions?
I'm happy to, or I'm happy to actually defer, since I've actually had a shot at them. So I'm good either way.
Okay. Are there any? Well, I'll leave it to the body. Councilmember Ray does have some specific questions he would like to have City Administrator answer tonight. Does anybody want to start, or should we just go with Chris?
Go with Chris.
Go with Chris.
So the first is there was an article last week that ran in the Seattle Times around Arch, and the first question I have is, did the Times article fairly describe the current situation with the portfolio of housing that is managed by Arch?
Yeah, so I think the basics of the article were correct. Those have been issues that we as Arch have highlighted for the council, and Arch has made several statements to that effect as well. I would say that the article didn't relay all of the context or the full story. But this city, other cities, all of Arch have acknowledged that there have been some issues with some units in the portfolio, and that we have taken action to investigate those issues and cases, and we've taken steps to resolve many of them at this point already.
Thanks. So one of the agenda bill before us today is to approve the 2019 work plan. I noted that there is consultant time in there to dig into some of the issues that have been raised by the media, which was, I think, a very proactive step on the part of Arch. Beyond the consultant time, how are the Arch 2019 and work plan different from the 2018 work plan?
Sure. There are a few things. I'm not going to go. It's a lengthy work plan, as you've seen in the agenda bill, so I won't go through every little piece, but I'll talk about it sort of in general. The work plan does change from year to year. Some elements of the work plan remain fairly similar from one year to the next, like conducting the Housing Trust Fund application round or developing the annual budget for the organization. And then there are elements that change. Some elements are individual projects or policy work that Arch is taking on There are also work plan items that apply organization-wide across all the cities that are members. One of those in 2019 that is different from 2018 is that top priority of us taking these extra efforts to strengthen the program administration and the monitoring functions. That's a special and new priority on the work plan and involves a lot of component tasks. Those are broken down in Section 3 of that work plan that's titled Housing Program Implementation, and subsection B in particular that's titled Program Improvements. And I won't read all of those, but there are several new pieces, even within that newer section, that I would highlight as the meat of what is different. In addition, and this is highlighted in that section, but it sounds a little bit different in scope, so I wanted to highlight it, where the Executive Board has also begun doing the work of assessing the overall capacity of the organization. That's both staff and tools available to us to maintain and increase the current levels of oversight, particularly as the number of ARCH units in the portfolio grows.
I think I'm going to skip my next question because I think you just answered it. It really dealt with what ARCH is doing different in 2019 to address the findings or the issues, concerns that were raised in the various media reports. But I know that ARCH has hired or is hiring a consultant to help to get to the crux of this. When do we expect to have that report done, and is that something that ARCH will share with the member cities?
Yes, that consultant is already under contract. That was ARCH staff worked with the Executive Board to do some precursor work in late 2018, very early 2019. Consultant was brought on board, I think officially under contract just last month, but has already begun the work. We're expecting a draft report sometime early summer. As soon as that is finalized, then the Executive Board will review it, and soon thereafter we should be able to share that with member councils, and the Executive Board will not only process it, because we've had a lot of work with the various programs run by ARCH, and should have an opportunity to ask questions and seek clarification on the recommendations that are being made. But then we can also strengthen the recommendation back out to member councils to say these are the things that we think all of our cities need to take action on. And there will be, I assume, some actions that will be able to be undertaken under the interlocal agreement administratively per the direction of the Executive Board, and other actions that will have to come back, I imagine, to member councils to vote to adopt and pursue. So late summer is my best guess at when that would be coming back through member councils.
And I have one question that I didn't share with you earlier that it just occurred to me as I was preparing, and it really was, and you kind of teed it up actually in that response. What is it that the city of Issaquah can do differently to ensure that ARCH is successful and that we do have affordable housing options in this region? Is there anything that we can do now to help ARCH in its mission?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of things. I think this body has done an excellent job of trying to support the creation of affordable housing in a lot of different ways. And we have housing strategies that will help move the needle as well. With regard to ARCH, I expect we will have a good list of recommendations on how we need to change our approach. Some of the issues that we have faced have to do with preservation of a housing unit that once is required. For example, most of the units in the Highlands were required as part of the development agreement. We have other units that have been recipients of public funds. And so there are different actions we can take depending on the level of control that we exercise over those units, or the city's desire to maintain a higher level of involvement going forward. So I'm looking forward to opportunities to discuss all of those actions that we can take in greater detail when those recommendations have been prepared, and gauge City Council's interest in putting more of the city's weight behind each of those.
Thank you.
Questions?
That's it for me. Like I said, I had a couple of questions that I wanted to get out, and I wanted to give the full council an opportunity to discuss this before we move forward with a motion on it.
So let's stay in question and answer for now before we go to a motion. Are there any other questions? And if not, is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion.
Thanks.
I'd like to move to approve the 2019 Arch Work Program and Budget.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Council President Martz.
So for me, I don't have any questions at this moment, because for me, the rubber is going to meet the road the next time we look to have a major project that Arch is a part of. And then the public is going to say, how do you know that the challenges that were identified aren't going to be a problem going forward? And that's, to me, where I will probably have a bunch of questions. So, not today, but
Reserve your right.
I reserve my right and look forward to a big project that Arch is part of coming to our city soon.
Some other comments or questions? Councilmember Winterstein.
Thank you. In Section 3B, which is cited as program improvements area, I do see some language in there, which the little bit I know about some of the issues that occurred definitely had related to properties that had gone through foreclosure, and then there were secondary lenders involved, and there were certain regulations that tied to their involvement, which did make these properties available at market rates. And so I'm very encouraged when I see those, the active participate or seeking of input from those secondary market lenders, in this case, FHA and Fannie Mae. I mean, I think the limited information that I have, I think that their input is going to be critical. And that, to me, is the organization going right to the crux of the issue and working with those who have regulatory bodies it was their participation that largely, is my understanding, was created this opportunity when these properties foreclosed. So I'm glad to see that. Absolutely. There's nothing that's happened here. It's very unfortunate. We are stewards of the public funds. And I take that very seriously. I think everybody who's involved with Arch takes very seriously. To see that investment kind of be lost and now how those turn into market rate units and no longer getting that public benefit from that original investment that was made is very unfortunate. But with my vote tonight in support of this, I do want to signal that my ongoing support, both now for the work that has been done and for the work to be done. This affordable housing is a difficult problem to address. I think Arch and its concept and its member cities and participants in its leadership are very effective and creative in following that objective. And I'm most interested in seeing it continue to learn from this and to continue to succeed in its mission. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion? Okay, seeing none. Call for the vote on approving the 2019 Arch Work Program and Budget. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries unanimously. The second item that was moved down to regular business is AB 7714, agenda bill requesting council adoption of an ordinance amending Issaquah Municipal Code, chapters 3.64 and 18.22 to comply with an order issued by the U.S. Federal Communications Commission related to the deployment of small cells and other wireless infrastructure within the city. And I believe Councilmember Winterstein pulled it down?
Yes, I did. Thank you. Yes, and didn't come here planning to do that, but this afternoon, as I was completing my preparations for this meeting, I realized that the council infrastructure meeting from the 21st wasn't available online in video. So I wasn't able, and I realize others, I just did another check right now that we weren't able to really follow up to see what happened during that meeting. Hopefully that'll be reconciled, but since this was an action in front of us this evening, and Director Niven was in the House, I thought I wanted to take this opportunity to, we at Council Infrastructure on the 21st, we spent a lot of time talking about level 1 reviews. And there was a number of alternatives, and my purpose really isn't to discuss all of those alternatives right now, but we had questions then, and I thought that they were adequately answered about what adjacent means. And we had questions then, too, about the shot clock and this idea of there being some type of administrative appeal that was put in, and I felt that they were very adequately addressed in committee. And I think for the public's benefit and for my colleagues on the council's benefit, I think those are two questions that we don't have an opportunity to go review on the record. And maybe that video will be back up there soon, but I couldn't see it today. So that was my reason to bring down, and I would ask that if Director Niven would have could address some of those questions that we discussed on the 21st.
Quick question for the city administrator. So there's a couple of options. One is to redo part of the presentation this evening, go through Q&A. The other would be to push this to the next council meeting and give council enough time to review the video.
I think we've confirmed the video is available online. It may not have had the hyperlink that we typically put as an option on the agenda itself, but it's available on our YouTube channel and via the city's website.
Oh, I'm looking at it right here. It's not listed, so I'm not sure what's amiss here.
Yeah,
so
let me come Sorry, Paul, go ahead.
No, it had been my intent to replay that, and since I was unable to, for whatever reason, I also realized but none of my colleagues would have had an opportunity to do the same. So
good point. So I guess my question is this: if there's several ways to do this, the video is available. If you've watched it, great. If you feel like you need an opportunity to watch it, great. If you feel like you're ready to vote on it tonight, we can vote on it.
Madam Mayor. Sorry, made a mistake. We were looking at the February video.
This was March 21st.
We're still researching it. It appears that it may not be available, as Councilmember Winterstein said.
So what is the will of the body? What would you like to do this evening? The video is not posted. So would you like to push this to April 15th? Allow your time to review it. Councilmember Walsh.
So as someone who was at that meeting and was able to discuss it, I felt like as much as there was a 2-to-1 vote, we came to a point to say this is a fairly small change to what has previously been approved multiple times through this whole conversation on small cell. So I would be suggestive to move forward. I think we had also heard from Director Niven that there were some applications ready to go, and I do not want the city to be in a position where we are in violation of the FCC rule if those come through. So that's another reason I would suggest moving forward.
So I will let folks comment, and I will let Keith and Emily decide if that shot clock is actually an issue, and we'll get you an answer on that. Any other comments?
Well, I just want to make it clear that I want to take this opportunity to ask Director Niven a couple questions.
Oh, sure.
This evening. That's why I brought it down.
Oh, okay. It sounded like what you wanted was him to represent a couple of the points that he had done at the meeting. So there are questions from the meeting.
That were addressed in the meeting that have been re-raised in the public forum. And if there indeed was not a public record available of that, this would be an opportunity to recreate that record.
So for questions, Keith, come on up.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. You weren't here last time I was here, so welcome. Hi again, City Council. Specifically, did you have some questions you wanted me to respond to?
The language that's proposed in the amended code in front of us does describe level 1 notifications to all properties adjacent to the proposed structure. Could you describe for the council that meaning of adjacent?
So why don't I go through all of it all at once? Let's just kind of do the whole thing. So the question was raised by Mr. Kapler at Infrastructure about the ambiguity in his mind of what adjacency meant. And given the fact, and we went through, I'm going to show this, I apologize, I'm not sure which camera's on. Oh, hey, that one in front of me. You know, we showed a diagram in Infrastructure. I didn't bring that presentation. I really don't want to get it up. But we showed what the 300-foot radius would look like in one diagram. We also then, this is the checklist. So the proposed code that's in front of you references that a complete application needs to follow a checklist provided by the city on its webpage. So this is that checklist. That checklist has a diagram, which I apologize, I ripped the corner off this because I didn't know I'd need it tonight, shows some different layouts of what adjacency means, and there's also a note on it that says if there's any ambiguity about adjacency to contact the Permit Center, and we will provide some clarity on that for the specific applications in process. The issue on the shot clock was brought up also at Infrastructure Committee. There is an allegation, and I'm going to say allegation because it's the wireless provider's position that the appeal portion of our land use code would be out of compliance with the FCC order. Obviously, not to my knowledge has that been litigated, so I think it's their assertion. Daniel Kenny from Ogden Murphy Wallace was at the Infrastructure Committee meeting, and we did talk about that specifically. We also have a section in City Code. It's 1804-260. The title of that is Permit Issuance Prior to the Expiration of an Appeal Period. So I think, and we also talked about if someone were to appeal something and we believed we needed to execute within the provisions of the shot clock, that we could, if we felt that that appeal was not on grounds of merit, that we could, as the city, request that dismissal from the hearing examiner so it wouldn't even necessarily go to a hearing. So there's a lot of ways that this can play out, and it was our position that the recommendation from the carriers that we don't allow these administrative decisions to be appealable is inconsistent with every other administrative decision that we issue in the land use code, and part of what they've always been asking for is treat us the same as everybody else. And so I think that's the reason why we didn't concede to making that recommendation.
Thank you. Other questions? No questions. Do we want to have a motion and then a chance to discuss?
I'm making sure I have it.
I have it here if you want it.
Okay, so this is from page 154 of tonight's packet. I would move to adopt ordinance number 2867, amending IMC 3.64.10, fees for applications for subdivisions and land use actions, and amending IMC Chapter 18.22, wireless communication facilities, as recommended by the Council Infrastructure Committee.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to adopt ordinance number 2867. Is there discussion? Councilmember Winterstein.
Just a quick note that I appreciate the comments this evening on all sides, and it would have been impossible for me at least to support any motion that suggested that citizen comments or feedbacks or challenge to any decision, that was pointless for someone to submit. And that's what was suggested here. And I think with this action, I wanted to reaffirm that no matter really, no issue is really kind of too small for our administrators to accept some type of comment or potentially appeal of a decision. It's very important that our citizens realize that their time and effort and concern around those matters are important and that we're going to hear them.
Thank you. Other comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. The motion is to adopt ordinance number 2867, amending IMC 3.64.010 fees for applications for subdivisions and land use actions, and amending IMC chapter 18.22, wireless communication facilities, as recommended by the Council Infrastructure Committee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Back on to our agenda. We're at good of the order. Council President Martz.
So a couple weeks ago, I asked about the council to consider whether we wanted to take a position or support PIC taking a position on the latest IMIN initiative, I-976. We don't normally do such things, but I put it in front of you because it has the potential to impact, of course, our sound transit activities. So I wanted to see if people had had a chance to take a look at it and think about it, and if I could get a sense of the body before I go back to PIC in a week and a half and talk about this.
Just a clarification, an opinion, it could also be we are in no camp right now. We're just taking in information.
Yep. Okay. It could be, let's not take any position, let's take position X, let's take position Y.
Awesome.
Let's write our own initiative.
Our own initiative. Okay. Open up the floor to whoever would like to weigh in on this one.
I'll wait.
Councilmember Ray.
I'm reticent to take a position one way or the other on of a political issue, and it may not be this specific political issue, but it could be setting a precedent that we would do that. So my feeling is, if we were going to do something like that, if there was a unanimous support for the idea, then it's something that would make sense. But I think if we had any kind of a split on the council around a support for it, then I don't believe we should or would be proper for us to say this is where the city stands on any particular issue. And what I'm thinking about is, this may be one where the issue splits, I don't know, 6-1, 5-2, and the majority is in one camp, but it could be the other one that splits 4-3 or something like that, and it's like, that doesn't really represent the will of the entire council. And so I am reticent to, set this precedent that we're going to start to talk about the city's position on a political issue unless there's unanimous support for that issue.
Others?
I would take that a similar stance to say that if the city wanted to make a statement on, whether or not we would want to repeal the authority to impose the vehicle license fee, that would be one thing, but tying it to an initiative and the full text of that, I think is a little bit more difficult as a government body to make a statement on.
Thank you, Councilmember Wash. Councilmember Hunt, you had your hand up.
So I have a question. The Sound Cities Association does take positions on issues, political or otherwise. I'm not totally sure about the use of the word political here, but it does take positions on issues that affect member cities.
On issues, yes. On votes, almost never.
Okay,
But
so
but
on
on
items
issues
on
that are in
ballots.
front of the county council or, the state, they have a legislative agenda the same way we do. Slightly different, but yes.
Okay, so I think my thought on this is that it is likely something that will affect our city specifically. So if there's a level of understanding about how that information, how that initiative would affect our city, I think it would be good for me and the council to truly understand the impact of that. And I think that in our position as council members representing the best interests of the city, I think if we feel that this is something that are taking a stance on this issue and representing that to town cities would be in the best benefit of our city, I think we should do that. So I would like more information specific about the city, but I'm also, I think, because it's something that will definitely affect our city, it affects our planning, it affects how we expect to grow in the future and where we expect growth to go potentially, and many other things about how we see our city in the future. I think it would be good to consider taking a position on this more fully.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you. The timing. So this wouldn't be on the ballot until November. And so SCA is seeking comment now?
SCA is deciding whether they're sort of having a broader version of the exact same conversation we're having right now. Do they want to think about taking a position on it? Do they want to stay the heck away from it? I think some cities would like SCA to take a position on it, and some cities are probably thinking they want to stay away from it.
And Deputy Councilor Batiste, did I see your hand up in the air as well?
Yes. So I think that this is always a little bit difficult when we're looking at something exactly like this and SCA is deciding which way to go. But it seems like this one is a bit out of the ordinary, and that it is something that could directly impact our city. So I think if we had more information and we were able to really analyze that and give feedback, and I think because it would have a direct impact on our city and Sound Transit, looking into that further seems to make sense to me.
Councilmember Winterstein.
Thank you. Thank you. At one level, legislation that comes out of Olympia or legislation that's done via this initiative process is has effects on us many different ways. If I just look at this as something like potentially a new law that'll affect revenues and planning, and SCA as a body and a majority of its member cities feel that for their own best interest, I think Councilmember Hunt put it really well. I mean, we're in the best interest of our cities. That it's important one way or the other to take a stand to try to influence the outcome of this vote, whether it happens in Olympia underneath the dome or it happens in the ballot box. It's a vote on code that would affect our city in multiple different ways. So I don't really think that the structure of the question is as big an impediment for me as it might be for others. So I would encourage the SCA to further deliberate this and not shut this conversation down.
Mr. President Mertz.
So I respect, Councilmember Ray, I respect your concern that we not, ardently, we be careful how we cast a 4-3 or a 5-2 vote. I shudder when we sort of decide on things that we need to get to unanimity or close to unanimity, right? Because then you can just have weird dynamics where somebody says, well, you know, I want pink albatrosses, and if I don't get pink albatrosses, we won't have unanimity, and then the thing collapses. I think it would be, I mean, we are the poster child for a city that would get you know, whose plans would be substantially altered if this goes through, and plans that we've been spending a long time putting in place. So if we don't support looking at taking a position on it, I don't know who would, right? I mean, it's really, it would just have a profound impact on us in particular, and just because we're at the end of the ST3 package, right? So I would very much like us to consider taking a position on this.
Now you have to roll that all up into what you're taking back.
I think what I'm hearing is a general consensus that people would like to consider it. We're not ready to take a position on it, but it would not be unreasonable for SCA to consider taking a position on it. And that we as a city are going to have to look at it a little bit further before we would think about whether we would explicitly add our voices to saying people should vote no to this initiative. Or yes.
Head nods. Generally take that back. Councilmember Ray?
I just want to, I don't have any problem with, you know, this particular issue, quite honestly. I have a lot of angst about the precedent it sets. And so, you know, a year from now, we come back with something that is more divisive, and we say, no, the city council is completely supportive of this, and half the city whatever 3/7 equals out to 42% of the city council isn't supportive of it, and yet we would do that. So I just urge thoughtfulness and caution before we start wading in as 7 individuals who are all separately elected in trying to influence the outcome of another election, and that's what this is. So that's where my heart is right now.
Councilmember Goodman?
So maybe jumping ahead, but I think there's a difference between making statements as a body that we support an initiative. There's a difference between that and making statements, factual statements about the impact to our city if this were to pass, because there will be a lot of differences of opinion in the community about, for example, whether somebody cares if the rug gets ripped out from under us. Maybe they don't like the path that we're headed down, and other people do. But I do think that we have a responsibility to communicate to our community what this means for our community in terms of planning and what the consequences might be, and then voters can draw their own conclusions and make their own decisions about how they're going to vote.
Council President Mertz.
Chris, I just want to point out that we do historically take a position on, for instance, school bonds and levies, right? Even though that is an issue before the public, because we see we have in the past decided that was something that as a city had a significant impact on us, whether it passed or didn't. And one could argue that this is a similar kind of situation.
Yeah, and I just to not wanting to have this discussion, well, I guess I wanted to have this discussion, is I think that's fine, and that's where there is unanimity on direction. I think that's good. I'm just saying that if we're going to come out as a body and say something like that, I think we have to unanimously as a body support that, because what I don't think is healthy is for there to be a split and, publicly the council is saying one thing, and, in another forum, we've got 2 council people going to the press and saying, I think that is the dumbest idea ever, and I would never support that thing. So I just want us to be unified. If we're going to do something like that, because it's a bold statement, I just want us to be unified when we do it. That's where my head's at.
I just want to point out, we have been very lucky in this body to generally have 7 individuals that are all listening to each other and trying to get to consensus even when they disagree. Many councils have 1 or more council members who have been elected specifically to never say yes to any tax of any kind, right? And you could have that here, right? In which case, by your criteria, we would never support anything that had taxes. So I'm just, again, we're into sort of a philosophical conversation, but we have been lucky because we have people who look at each individual issues and don't sort of have just down the line one-way voting about everything. But
So, Councilmember Goodman.
And I think to Councilmember Ray's point, I have known council members to struggle with exactly what we're talking about when. For example, it would be a struggle to come up with positive statements with something that you might not support, and so you have to. It's difficult to try to reconcile those 2 things. So, and I agree with your point about I think we should be able to come up with a unanimous statement, and I think we can carefully do that if we choose to put out a statement about an issue.
If I pull back and sort of draw a summary out of that, what I'm hearing from the council president's question for PIC is that, yes, it depends. We would like PIC to continue to talk about it. We would like ourselves to get more data to understand the impact, but there was no disagreement that it would be a significant impact to the city if that tab were to pass.
And I have a much smaller, quick, for good of the order. I just want to mention to everybody that the Issaquah Youth Advisory Board has put together a thing called the QUA, which is a show created by Issaquah Youth to discuss issues that impact teens in our community. The first show is out, and one of the things they have is a council corner. And they asked me to be the first interviewee. So Cole Pence interviewed me. You can find this under, you can either go into YouTube and look for the QUA and look for Issaquah, or from the city's website, you can go to Your Government ICTV, and it's under Community Spirit. But the first show has a segment on the garage in terms of interviews with students and staff, has the aforementioned council corner, which is only 3.5 minutes, and then a substantial conversation about the new block schedule at Issaquah High School and what it means for students there. So I commend the Issaquah Youth Advisory Board for getting that going, and I look forward to seeing more of them in the future.
And it's also in an email I sent you today from Kaylee Jake. And since it's called Council Corner, I guess you all should expect a call at some point. I had one item for good of the order as well. I just thought I'd give a little quick update about why I did not make the meeting tonight. I did go down to Olympia. I was there at 3:15 today for a 3:30 hearing for the Senate operating budget. It is the only hearing that they will have. The Senate budget did not include full mitigation for the streamlined sales tax, and the House budget did. So I went to reiterate with the mayor of Kent and the mayor of Tukwila that it would leave approximately $550,000 hole a year in our budget, which would be very significant for us to try and fill. Interesting thing is that there is a Senate movement to have the top 2 cities still mitigated, and we're 4 or 5. I can't remember. We're 3 or 4 on the list, and so it was really nice to have one of those mayors down there tonight saying, hey, it should be for all of those cities that are impacted. So that was great. And then I had some upcoming council meetings. If anybody has got anything else for good of the order? Okay. The April 8th council work session at 6:30 in the Pickering Room at City Hall Northwest. At this meeting, council will be taking public comment on the Puget Sound Regional Council Vision 2050 and discussing the Mobility Master Plan jointly with the Transportation Advisory Board. And the April 15th regular council meeting at 7 p.m. in Chambers. Potential agenda items include the Ruth Keys and Community Environmental Awards, the bid award for City Hall Northwest and Holiday Inn Sewer Project, and Puget Sound Regional Council Vision 2050. I believe it is, what is the action on the 15th?
Public comment?
Do the consolidating the comment? Is there also public comment at the 8th? Okay, so 2 opportunities. Okay. Great. April 16th, there's a special council work session at 5 p.m. Council will discuss the draft citywide strategic plan, and that meeting will be in the Pickering Room at City Hall Northwest. Any other items? There is no executive session this evening, and we are adjourned at 10:10.